There are nights when even the strangest worlds can feel gentle, when chaos folds into quiet wonder. Tonight we enter one of Rick and Morty's most surreal adventures, Anatomy Park. But here we'll retell it softly, like a bedtime story whispered at midnight. And before we begin, I want you to know, we truly love and care for you. You are safe here. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's step gently into the story. It was Christmas Eve, though the air inside the Smith household felt less like celebration and more like a sigh stretched across time. Lights blinked lazily on the tree, their glow spilling like spilled paint onto the floor, flickering in soft reds and greens. The family gathered in their own rhythms, Jerry fumbling with the ornaments, Beth sipping quietly at her wine, Summer scrolling endlessly on her phone. But Morty sat apart, watching. He noticed something others didn't, the way Rick's gaze wandered. Not toward the twinkling tree or the food spread on the table, but toward a place beyond. Rick's eyes weren't drunk with joy or dulled by drink. They were searching, wandering into some invisible horizon only he seemed able to see. Morty shifted on the couch, caught between the noisy warmth of his family and the silent gravity of Rick's thoughts. He didn't quite know why it unsettled him, only that it did. The world outside was hushed, snow gathering on fences and rooftops, but inside Morty felt a quiet unease. He wanted to ask Rick what he was thinking. He wanted to reach into that distance, but Rick wasn't the type to answer. Not in the way Morty wanted. Instead, Rick muttered under his breath, tinkering with a small object hidden in his coat pocket. The faint clink of metal against glass was swallowed by the hum of the room, and no one else noticed. No one except Morty. Morty's mother laughed at something Jerry said, an awkward, too loud laugh that tried to fill the spaces between them. Summer sighed, rolling her eyes, but Morty kept his eyes on Rick, and in that moment Rick looked back. It wasn't a long glance, just a fleeting acknowledgement, like a lighthouse beam catching a boat in the night. But it was enough. Morty saw the exhaustion hidden in Rick's face, the way brilliance carried loneliness like a shadow. Morty's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. He didn't even know what he was feeling, only that Rick seemed both entirely there and entirely elsewhere. The minutes slipped by like snowflakes against glass, each one quiet, delicate, and gone before it could be caught. Morty imagined he could hear the house breathing, the radiator sighing, the clock ticking, the tree lights buzzing faintly. The world reduced itself to small sounds, small gestures, small silences, and Rick's silence was the loudest of all. Morty closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the muffled clatter of dishes in the kitchen, Jerry humming an off-key carol. He wanted to belong to that noise, to fold into it the way one folds into a warm blanket. But the truth was, he felt apart. He felt the pull of Rick's drifting gaze like a rope tied to his own chest. When he opened his eyes again, he found Rick still watching, not him, not the room, but some corner of the night, beyond the walls. A place Morty couldn't see, but could somehow feel. It was in that gaze that the first whisper of the night began. Not a sound, not words, but a kind of calling. A promise that something was stirring just out of sight. Something strange, something meant for him. Morty swallowed, glancing back at his family. They seemed locked in their own little patterns, unaware of the quiet tether pulling him and Rick into another orbit. And perhaps that was the mystery of Christmas Eve, that while the world bustled in tradition and noise, there was always a softer, hidden rhythm moving beneath. A rhythm of unspoken thoughts and strange beginnings. Morty leaned back into the couch, staring at the blinking lights. They blurred in his eyes until they looked like distant stars, scattered across the branches. And he wondered as the minutes passed, if Rick's mind was already far away, was he meant to follow? For all the warmth of the room, Morty felt a shiver run through him. A shiver not of cold but of possibility. And in the flickering quiet he knew something was about to begin. Christmas Eve stretched on gently, like a song played at half speed. The house settled into its familiar rhythm, Beth stacking plates in the sink, Jerry humming tunelessly as if he could stitch the night together with his clumsy voice, Summer sighing in her corner. Yet Morty's attention stayed tethered to Rick. Rick didn't seem interested in food or laughter or the fragile rituals of family. Instead, his hand lingered in his coat pocket, fiddling with that small object Morty had glimpsed before. Its shape was hidden, but its weight seemed real, more real than the blinking tree lights or the paper-wrapped boxes scattered beneath it.
Rick?
Morty whispered, his voice nearly drowned by the clatter of dishes. What's in your pocket? Rick's eyes flicked toward him, sharp but softened by the shadows of the room. For once, Rick didn't meet Morty's question with a grumble or a sarcastic jab. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was almost a lullaby of words. "It's not the kind of gift you wrap, Morty," he said. Morty blinked, unsure if he was supposed to feel excited or afraid. With Rick, the line between the two was always blurred. Rick pulled out the object, letting it rest in his hand like something fragile, though Morty knew Rick rarely treated anything with that kind of care. It wasn't a toy nor a trinket, nor anything that looked remotely like it belonged under a tree. It was small, metallic, shaped oddly, as though it had been built from pieces of forgotten machines and whispers of ideas. It's not really finished," Rick muttered, staring at it with eyes that seemed both proud and haunted. "But it doesn't need to be finished. Some things you just have to experience." Morty tilted his head, his voice trembling with curiosity. "Experience what?" Rick didn't answer right away. He just looked at Morty, and for a flicker of a moment the sharp edges of his personality softened. His eyes held something that almost looked like... "Trust, it's a journey," Rick said at last. "Not one you'll find on any map. Not one you'll understand right away, but it's something I think you need." Morty swallowed hard. A journey. The word itself felt heavy, mysterious, like stepping into a story that was already unfolding, waiting for him. "But why me?" Morty asked, his voice breaking slightly. Rick smirked faintly, though it wasn't his usual smug grin. This one was smaller, sadder. "Because, Morty, you're the only one who'll listen." The words sank into Morty like snowflakes melting on warm skin, soft, quiet, undeniable. Around them, the family continued their rituals, blissfully unaware of the strange conversation unfolding in the corner. Jerry was still talking about some childhood memory no one else cared to hear. Summer sighed again. Beth rubbed her temples, already weary of the night, but between Rick and Morty there was a hush, a private silence that separated them from the rest of the world. Rick held out the object. Its surface glimmered faintly under the Christmas lights, though its glow seemed to come more from within than from any reflection. Morty hesitated. His fingers hovered, uncertain. To take it was to agree. To hold it was to step into something unknown. And Morty, despite the unease curling in his chest, knew that once he touched it, there would be no turning back. Rick's gaze softened again, though he said nothing. His silence was the closest thing to encouragement Morty had ever received from him. Finally, Morty reached out. His small, trembling hand closed around the object. It was warm. Warmer than metal should be. Almost alive. Morty's breath caught in his throat. He looked at Rick, searching for an explanation. But Rick only gave a small nod as if to say, "Yes, this is yours now." Morty clutched the strange gift against his chest, his heartbeat quickening beneath it, and in that moment, he realized this wasn't a gift meant for Christmas morning, or for show, or for the noisy approval of family. This was something different, something secret, something that whispered directly into him, calling him to places he had never known, places he could not yet imagine. The room around him blurred. The lights of the tree stretched into streaks of stars. The chatter of his family faded into distant echoes. For a moment, it felt as though he and Rick were the only two people left in the universe. And in that fragile silence, Morty understood. This was not about science alone. This was about trust. Rick leaned back, lighting his flask as though nothing had happened, muttering under his breath, "Don't tell the others." Morty nodded, still clutching the strange object. His heart was racing, but his body felt weightless, like he had already begun drifting into another world. The gift wasn't wrapped in paper, ribbons, or bows. It was wrapped in mystery, wrapped in Rick's unspoken care, and it was the beginning of everything. The night stretched long and heavy, filled with the muted sounds of a family clinging to tradition. The clatter of forks and knives, the chatter about gifts, Jerry's bumbling voice, Summer's groans, it all blended together into a distant hum. Morty sat quietly, the strange object still warm in his palm, its faint glow hidden from the others. He kept glancing at Rick, hoping for another word, another clue. But Rick said nothing. He sipped from his flask, staring into the space beyond the walls, as though his mind was already somewhere else, somewhere far away and unreachable. Morty's chest tightened. What was he supposed to do with this? This wasn't a video game or a toy or anything that could be explained with instructions. It was something bigger, stranger, quieter. It carried a weight that Morty didn't yet understand. He opened his mouth to ask, then closed it again. The words felt too fragile, too loud for the moment. Instead, he studied Rick's face. There was something unusual there beneath the lines of age, the faint smudges of exhaustion. For once, Rick didn't look defiant or smug or sharp-edged. He looked soft, as if, just for tonight, he'd let his armor fall away. And in that soft silence, Morty understood something without needing it to be explained. This wasn't a gift to be debated. It wasn't something to refuse, it was an invitation. Morty swallowed hard. His fingers curled around the strange object, feeling its pulse, steady, warm, alive. His hesitation lingered like fog, but within it bloomed a quiet certainty. He didn't know what he was stepping into, but he knew he wanted to step into it. When Rick finally looked at him, their eyes met, and Morty gave the smallest of nods. Barely noticeable, but enough. Rick's gaze softened in return. No smirk, no clever remark, just a quiet acknowledgement, like two travelers who had agreed to walk a road together. The silence between them became its own kind of agreement. Morty didn't need to say yes out loud. He didn't need to ask what if. The stillness spoke for him. The simple act of not turning away was his answer. The hum of the family carried on in the background, unbroken as if nothing had shifted. But for Morty, everything had changed. The tree lights flickered, reflections dancing across the ornaments like stars caught in glass. Morty stared at them, and for a fleeting second, they seemed to stretch outward, endless, like a universe waiting. Rick leaned closer, his breath warm with the faint scent of alcohol, his voice no louder than a sigh. "All right, Morty, that's all I needed." And then, just as quickly, he leaned back, taking another sip from his flask, returning to the image of a man indifferent to the world. But Morty knew better. The agreement was sealed not with words, but with trust. Not with contracts, but with silence. Morty sat back, heart still racing, but strangely at peace. He didn't fully understand what lay ahead, but for the first time he didn't feel the need to. Sometimes the beginning of a journey doesn't arrive with explanations. It arrives with a nod, with a glance, with silence that means everything. And in that silence Morty had already begun. The house was still alive with Christmas chatter, but for Morty the world had gone strangely quiet. The nod had been given, the silent promise made. Now he sat with the strange device resting in his palm, its glow faint but steady, as though it breathed alongside him. Rick didn't rush him. That was the oddest part. Normally Rick barked orders, pushed Morty headfirst into chaos, laughed at his hesitation. But tonight Rick simply sat, waiting, watchful, strangely patient. His silence carried weight, like he understood that this wasn't a leap to be taken lightly. Morty's breath hitched as he felt the device warm against his skin. Slowly it pulsed brighter, its light bleeding between his fingers, washing his hand in pale gold. He blinked against it, and suddenly the living room seemed to blur. The Christmas tree, the voices of his family, the clinking of dishes, all softened as though slipping behind a curtain. "Just let it happen," Rick murmured, his voice low, almost kind. Morty's eyelids fluttered. The glow thickened, surrounding him like a gentle cocoon. He felt himself leaning back, though his body never moved. A strange weightlessness lifted him, as though he were no longer sitting but drifting, untethered, and then he was falling, not the sharp drop of fear, but a slow dreamlike descent, as if the universe had cradled him in invisible hands. He drifted downward through soft shadows, his breath caught between awe and unease. The glow spread wider, and suddenly Morty saw it, a landscape unfolding beneath him. A vast world contained not in the stars, but in the folds of a body. At first it seemed impossible, absurd, but the more he looked, the more it resembled a dream. Great shapes curved like mountains, rivers pulsed with crimson light, walls glistened like caverns. Everything shimmered with a wet luminescence, alive, trembling faintly. Morty's body floated closer, descending into this strange realm. He realized he wasn't afraid. Not really. The surreal beauty held him steady. Even the strangeness of it, the fact that he was entering the inside of a man's body, felt less grotesque, more like a quiet miracle. He passed through what looked like a veil of mist, its texture soft and warm against his skin. Beyond it, glowing arches of tissue framed a kind of gateway leading him deeper inside. His feet touched down, but he didn't stumble. Instead, it felt as though the ground welcomed him, soft, springy, alive beneath his weight. Morty stood, blinking at the sight before him. There it was, Anatomy Park, but not the garish, chaotic theme park Rick had once described. This place felt dreamlike. The glowing signs shimmered softly, their light muted like lanterns under moonlight. Strange structures, rides, walkways, towers, rose gently from the living tissue around them, as if they'd grown there instead of being built. The entire place pulsed faintly, breathing with the rhythm of life. Morty's heart skipped. He wanted to recoil, to be unsettled, but instead he felt an odd peace, like he'd stepped into a secret world that had always been waiting. He turned, half expecting Rick to appear beside him, but the old man wasn't there. Only the soft echo of Rick's voice lingered in his memory. Just let it happen. Morty breathed deeply. The air thick but strangely sweet, he realized, with a slow calm, that he had already crossed the threshold. Whatever this was, dream, memory, science, or something beyond, he was inside it now. The descent was over, and yet, in the hush of the glowing park, Morty felt it was only the beginning. Morty stood in stillness, his breath caught between wonder and unease. The ground beneath him pulsed faintly as though alive, and yet it was strangely welcoming, soft, steady, like walking across a heartbeat. Before him stretched the park, Anatomy Park, but it wasn't what he had braced himself for. He'd expected garish lights, grotesque displays, the chaos of one of Rick's strange creations. Instead, the place unfolded like a dream half-remembered. The colors were gentle, subdued, lantern glows of pale amber, drifting lights the shade of twilight. Even the rides, the strange towers and winding paths seemed softened, their edges blurred as though sleep itself had built them. A soft mist hung in the air, glowing faintly with hues of crimson and gold, filtering every surface with warmth. The air was heavy yet calm, and when Morty drew in a breath, he thought he could taste something like honey. It should have been unsettling. It should have frightened him. He was, after all, standing inside the body of a man. Every wall around him was alive, every echo a reminder of breath, of circulation, of fragile mortality, and yet it didn't feel grotesque. It felt alive in a different way, a living landscape, a secret world that pulsed softly, in rhythm with something greater. Morty walked slowly forward, his footsteps muffled against the springy ground. He passed beneath an archway made of faintly glowing tissue, its surface rippling gently, as if stirred by unseen wind. Above it, a sign hung crookedly, its lights dim but steady. "Welcome to Anatomy Park." The words should have been loud, alarming, carnival-like. Instead, they hummed in silence, glowing faintly, as though carved into the air by memory itself. Morty swallowed, his chest tightening. He wasn't sure if he wanted to laugh or to run, but neither came. Instead, he just stood there, staring, letting the quiet of the place wash over him. He noticed things as he walked. Small details. A Ferris wheel of rib-like beams, glowing faintly blue, turning slowly, each cabin swaying like it was carried by a breeze that didn't exist. A carousel, but instead of horses, soft glowing shapes like cells spun gently, their light reflecting on the moist ground below. Her roller coaster looped in the distance, but its tracks weren't harsh metal. They looked organic, curved, almost tender. It wasn't the horror he had imagined. It was something gentler, stranger, almost beautiful. The mist curled low, hugging the pathways, catching the light in soft halos. Somewhere above, Morty thought he saw faint glimmers, like stars, though he knew they were impossible here. Still, their presence filled the air with quiet awe. The park breathed. He could feel it. Not in a way that threatened him, but in a way that reminded him he was inside something sacred. And though Rick wasn't beside him, Morty felt the old man's presence, faint and invisible. He knew Rick was watching somehow, guiding silently, though no words came. For the first time, Morty didn't feel like a pawn in Rick's game. He felt like he was being invited, softly, carefully, into a story larger than himself. He paused at a bench shaped from some smooth curve of living tissue. He sat, the seat warm beneath him, and let his eyes close for just a moment. The quiet hum of the park seeped into him, steadying his breath, slowing his thoughts. In that moment, Morty realized this wasn't about science or invention or spectacle. It was about listening to the quiet, listening to the body, to its rhythms, to its fragility. The park wasn't here to shock him. It was here to remind him. When Morty opened his eyes again, the mist had thinned, revealing more of the glowing structures beyond. He stood, his heart calmer now, and stepped forward once more. The quiet park stretched ahead, waiting. It didn't rush him. It didn't demand. It simply breathed softly, alive, like the steady rhythm of a lullaby. And Morty, though uncertain, walked on, his steps falling in time with the heartbeat beneath his feet. Morty walked deeper into the strange, dreamlike park, each step carrying him further away from the noise of Christmas and closer into something timeless. The mist shifted softly, parting like curtains, and in that unveiling he sensed he was not alone. At first he thought it was just a trick of light, some reflection of the glowing rides against the organic walls. But then a figure took shape, slow, unhurried, as though it had been there forever, simply waiting for him to arrive. The figure was neither frightening nor overly defined. Its outline shimmered faintly, like a candle flame seen through glass. Its face was gentle, ageless, neither young nor old, neither man nor woman. What Morty noticed most were the eyes. They were closed, yet he felt seen, as though the figure could hear not only his voice but his thoughts, his worries, the quiet hum of his heart. When it finally spoke, the voice was soft, barely louder than the hum of the park itself. Each word floated, slow, deliberate, like a lullaby whispered at the edge of sleep. "You came," it said. Morty swallowed, shifting nervously. His voice cracked when he tried to answer. I guess so." Rick said, you know that I should—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish. The figure tilted its head, not unkindly, as though Morty's fumbling words were already understood. "You did not come for Rick," it said gently. "You came because you felt the pull. Even if you do not yet know why." Morty frowned, his stomach fluttering. "I mean, I didn't really have a choice." The figure stepped closer, though its feet made no sound against the ground. "There is always a choice. Even silence is a choice. Even hesitation is a choice. And you chose to walk forward." Something about the voice calmed Morty. Its tone was neither commanding nor judgmental. It was patient, accepting, almost like the figure had been waiting for this moment, not days, not years, but forever. The park seemed to respond to its presence. Lights dimmed slightly, softening. The mist curled slower, thicker, as if listening. Even Morty's breath fell in rhythm with the figure's words. What are you?" Morty asked quietly. The figure smiled, if it could be called a smile. "A guide," it said. "Nothing more, nothing less. I have no face for you to remember, no name for you to call. I am here only to walk with you while you learn." Morty blinked. "Learn? Learn what?" The guide lifted a hand, pale, indistinct, but steady. It gestured to the park around them. The Ferris wheel turning slow as planets. The carousel glowing with the light of cells, the soft pulse of the walls that were not walls. "This place is not an amusement," it whispered. "It is a body. It is a memory. It is life, fragile and glowing. To walk here is to see not what is grotesque, but what is delicate. To see that inside what seems chaotic, there is order. Inside what seems ordinary, there is wonder." Morty shifted uneasily. "It's kind of weird, though. I mean, it's someone's body. Isn't that messed up?" The guide's voice softened further, like the faintest brush of wind. "Bodies are always strange. To those who live inside them, they are simply vessels. But to step outside and see, truly see, the rhythms, the patterns, the structures, it is to glimpse the poetry of existence." Morty rubbed his arms, unsure if the warmth he felt was from the park or from the words themselves. There was something in them that rang true, even if he didn't understand it. The guide lowered its hand. "You are here to listen, Morty. Not to conquer, not to escape, not to prove, just to listen. The park has much to say." Morty hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." The figure seemed pleased, though its expression never fully changed. It turned, gliding forward, and Morty instinctively followed. As they walked, the guide spoke in fragments, as though every sentence was a piece of something larger. Every cell remembers, every vessel carries, every beat whispers of time, of life, of endings. The words weren't commands. They weren't even explanations. They were offerings. Morty took them in like drops of water, uncertain but soothed. He noticed then that he didn't feel as afraid. The park no longer loomed. It breathed gently, alive but not threatening. He realized he wasn't walking through a carnival of horrors. He was walking through something sacred, accompanied by a presence that carried no judgment, only patience. At one point, Morty asked softly, "Why me?" The guide paused. For a long moment it said nothing. Then, in the same soft lullaby voice, it answered, "Because you were willing to be afraid. And those who allow themselves to be afraid can also allow themselves to grow." The words settled over Morty like a blanket. They didn't erase his fear, but they softened it, reshaped it into something quieter, something almost like courage. And with that, Morty realized, the guide wasn't here to lead him quickly or to show him everything at once. It was here to wait with him, to let him see slowly, gently, in his own time. As they continued walking, Morty felt the park shift again. Lights deepened into richer hues, glowing more steadily. The heartbeat beneath his feet felt calmer, steadier, like it too was reassured by the presence of the guide. For the first time since stepping inside, Morty didn't feel lost. He felt accompanied, and though Rick was still far away, watching from a distance, Morty sensed something new. That maybe he wasn't just Rick's pawn or Rick's experiment. Maybe he was a traveler in a strange, living dream, and the guide, patient and gentle, was here to help him learn how to listen. Morty followed the guide through winding corridors that seemed less like walls and more like veins of light pulsing softly beneath his feet. He felt as if he were drifting in a half-remembered dream, weightless and suspended, where gravity bent kindly rather than harshly. Around him, the architecture of the park shifted in subtle ways. What once looked like odd pipes and tubes now hummed with quiet life. They weren't merely conduits or machinery. They were the whispered memories of the body itself. Each structure holding a story, a moment, a fragment of a life lived. The guide's voice carried behind him, low and tender. These places, it said, are often forgotten. Even the most brilliant minds overlook what lies within the small and delicate. Yet every chamber, every winding passage has meaning. Morty's eyes widened as he took in the structures. Some glowed faintly red or pink, like the inner light of a cell, while others shimmered translucent green, yellow, and amber. Their surfaces weren't smooth or artificial. They seemed organic, textured, as if breathing silently alongside him. He reached out hesitantly, letting his fingers hover above a lattice of veins. To his surprise, he felt nothing sharp, nothing threatening, only warmth. The soft vibration of life. Why does it feel like it's alive? Morty asked. The guide's tone was patient. Because it is. Not merely alive in a biological sense, but alive with memory. Every structure, every organ, every tiny vessel holds echoes of the past, moments of joy, of fear, of tenderness. Even what seems broken carries beauty. Morty blinked. He hadn't expected to feel such weight in a place so strange, so unreal. The organs didn't just exist. They spoke quietly to him, resonating in ways he could almost understand. The heart pulsed faintly, a rhythm like a lullaby. The lungs expanded and contracted with a silent sigh. The stomach walls shimmered softly, like sunlight through water. Each sound, each movement seemed imbued with a story, and Morty realized he was listening to the body itself, not merely observing it. He followed the guide into a chamber filled with structures that seemed more fragile, almost translucent. Their surfaces were streaked with faint light, like veins of memory threading through glass. "These are the parts we often forget," the guide whispered. "They hold our earliest dreams, our simplest acts of kindness, the quiet laughter that never made it to the record books. They are delicate, easily overlooked, yet essential. To walk here is to honor them." Morty felt a soft pang in his chest. He imagined all the moments he had ignored in his own life, the times he had laughed without noticing, the small gestures of love he had not understood. These organs seemed to reflect that same fragility, as if they were mirrors of the overlooked tenderness within him. The guide drifted closer to a rib-like structure that arched overhead. See how it bends without breaking. Even when pressured, even when strained, it finds balance. You too, Morty, carry that potential, the quiet strength of endurance. Morty nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. The park no longer felt eerie. It felt reverent, like a sacred place built not for spectacle but for reflection. Each structure, no matter how small or odd, seemed to speak of patience, of resilience, of care. As they moved deeper, Morty noticed organs with faint inscriptions along their surfaces, lines that shimmered like tiny constellations. He bent closer, realizing they weren't words, not in any language he had learned, but impressions, soft motifs of emotion and memory. A heart that pulsed with gentle grief, a liver that hummed with laughter long past, a kidney that vibrated with quiet patience. Every part, the guide murmured, even what you cannot see has its role. Even what is unseen can shape everything else. Morty felt an unexpected tear slip down his cheek. He didn't know if it was sadness or awe or a mixture of both. The park, in its quiet magnificence, was teaching him a lesson he could not yet articulate, that life in its smallest details mattered. That fragility, delicacy, and memory were not weaknesses, but treasures to be held softly. He paused by a section that looked almost skeletal, delicate as frost. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "Even the broken parts," the guide nodded, its outline shimmering. "Yes, even the broken parts. And it is in seeing beauty in what is fragile that true understanding grows. You are learning to listen, Morty, not to the loud, the grand, or the obvious, but to what persists quietly, steadily beneath the surface." Morty's chest swelled with a gentle warmth. He realized he was no longer just observing Anatomy Park. He was connecting with it, feeling its patience, its resilience, its silent lessons. He understood in that soft, surreal way that dreams often bring, that every structure he saw held not just the mechanics of a body, but the essence of life itself. For a long while, Morty walked in silence, letting the hum of the park, the whispered lessons of the guide, and the faint glow of the forgotten structures fill him completely. Each organ, each fragile corridor, became a gentle reminder that life is a collection of delicate moments, each worthy of attention, each deserving of care. The guide's voice broke the quiet again, gentle as the touch of a pillow against a weary cheek. "Remember this, Morty. Not everything needs fixing. Some things need simply to be honored, noticed, and cherished. That is enough." Morty nodded, understanding in a way words could never capture. He had stepped into a strange, surreal world, but he had found lessons that reached far beyond. Fragility, patience, reverence, quiet courage. These were the gifts Anatomy Park offered him. And in that moment, Morty realized something profound. He didn't need to rush. He didn't need to conquer. He only needed to observe, to listen, to honor what was quietly present. The forgotten structures were not merely parts of a body. They were maps of the heart, guides to living with tenderness, and teachers of enduring strength. Morty stepped slowly through the winding paths of Anatomy Park, each step feeling lighter than the last, yet somehow heavier with thought. The forgotten structures still hummed faintly, whispering echoes of lives that had passed through this surreal landscape. He could feel it, a strange mixture of awe and unease, like standing at the edge of something infinite yet intimately personal. The park shimmered in soft, dreamlike light. Veins of red and gold glowed faintly beneath translucent walls. Organs breathed gently as if alive, each pulse marking a rhythm that resonated deep within Morty's chest. He realized with a shiver that even the most grotesque structures were beautiful when seen through the quiet lens of reverence. The strange became familiar. The unsettling became tender. It's strange, Morty whispered, his voice catching in his throat. "But I think I understand a little. Maybe beauty isn't just about what's pretty. Maybe it's about noticing." The guide's presence drifted nearby, voice soft and calm. "Exactly, Morty. Beauty can be found in what others fear, what they avoid. Courage is not always loud. It is often quiet. To witness, to linger, to wonder quietly. That is courage too." Morty's eyes wandered over a particularly curious section of the park. Tiny, delicate structures shimmered like fragile glass, branching in patterns too intricate for him to comprehend fully. They seemed almost alive, vibrating with stories of people he would never meet, moments he would never witness. Yet, as he stared, he felt connected, as if each story whispered gently into his heart. He hesitated before reaching out. "It's almost scary," he admitted. "To see all this and to know it matters so much." The guide nodded, its form glowing faintly in sympathy. "Fear and wonder often arrive together. It is the uneasy wonder that teaches most profoundly. To feel small before something vast, yet to stay and observe anyway, that is growth. Morty, that is learning to respect the delicate balance of life." Morty's fingers hovered just above a translucent, crimson-like structure. He could feel the faint warmth emanating from it, like the memory of a gentle hand on his own. "I never thought. But even something this strange could feel comforting," he murmured. "That is the essence of your journey," the guide replied. "Even here, even in what seems frightening, there is a thread of tenderness. You must learn to follow it." Morty took a deep breath and let his gaze drift over the flowing corridors of glowing tissue. Each bend, each curve, each pulse seemed to tell a story not in words but in feeling. He imagined the people whose lives had animated this inner landscape, and he imagined the quiet courage it had taken them to endure, to love, to exist. And suddenly the park was no longer strange. It was home, strange, yes, but profoundly alive. He wandered to a pool of what looked like red liquid, catching reflections of the soft light above. He expected something macabre, perhaps frightening, but instead he saw glimmers of stars mirrored in the surface, flickering and gentle. He reached down, letting his fingers brush the liquid lightly. The reflection shivered and Morty smiled softly. "I think I get it," he whispered. "Even scary things, to even weird, gross things, they have their own kind of beauty, and they teach us to see." The guide smiled, faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Yes, to see, Morty, is the first step toward understanding. To linger, to feel, to allow your unease to soften into wonder, that is the gift." Morty continued walking, letting his feet carry him through the twisting corridors, each section of the park more astonishing than the last. Organs hummed quietly, membranes glowed with soft, diffused light, and every corridor seemed to lead into yet another unexpected marvel. There were surprises in the form of fragile, glassy structures, corridors lined with veins like rivers of rubies, and chambers echoing with faint, musical tones that felt almost like laughter from the past. Despite the beauty, Morty could not shake a small thread of discomfort. Some of the structures were crooked, twisted, almost uncanny. Others seemed incomplete, or in the process of collapsing in the gentlest way imaginable. But instead of fear, he felt empathy. He realized that imperfection, fragility, and fleetingness were not failures. They were aspects of existence deserving attention and care. Even the broken parts. "They're important," Morty whispered to himself. He imagined all the moments in his own life where he had stumbled, been afraid, or felt inadequate. And somehow, in the quiet of Anatomy Park, he felt a comforting connection to all of it. The guide drifted beside him again, tones soft and affirming. "How you are beginning to understand, Morty. To hold wonder without judgment, to honor what is fragile, to see value in imperfection. This is the quiet strength that life offers. Most overlook it, fearing what they do not comprehend. You, however, are learning to witness with patience." Morty let his shoulders relax, exhaling slowly. He realized that his heart had expanded quietly, embracing both awe and unease, tenderness and subtle fear. In the surreal glow of Anatomy Park, he had begun to learn what it meant to observe fully, to feel deeply, and to respect the delicate pulse of life. Even in the strangest of places, he paused by a chamber whose walls shimmered like honeyed glass. Shadows of memories played across the surfaces, tiny fragments of laughter, whispers of quiet moments, soft echoes of hope. Morty leaned closer, letting the sights and sensations wash over him. He understood in a way that transcended words that the beauty of this park and of life itself was not in grandeur or spectacle, but in the intricate, delicate, and often overlooked details. The uneasy wonder that had first gripped him had softened into something warm and enduring. Morty knew he would carry this lesson beyond the park, that even in the most unfamiliar and frightening places, there was a hidden tenderness, waiting quietly to be recognized. And for the first time in his journey, Morty felt the full depth of his own courage, not the loud heroism of movies or stories, but the calm, gentle bravery of a heart willing to see, to linger, and to wonder without fear. Even from afar, Rick's presence was palpable. Morty had grown accustomed to the quiet hum of Anatomy Park, the soft glow of organs and tissues, the gentle pulse of the surreal body world around him. But beneath it all, an unspoken tether connected him to Rick, like a thread of light stretching invisibly across space. Rick's eyes, though distant, seemed to follow him with care. Not curiosity, not critique. Care. Morty paused at the edge of a glowing corridor, watching veins shimmer like rivers of liquid fire. The guide had drifted on ahead, murmuring gentle truths, yet the weight of Rick's observation settled around him like a warm blanket. He could feel it in his chest, an unspoken reassurance. Even here, in the strange and unsettling, he was not alone. I think he's watching me, Morty whispered softly to the guide. But not in the way he usually does, not like he's judging. More like he's caring. I don't know. It's weird. The guide's form shimmered faintly, voice a soft lull. Care often arrives without noise. Quiet observation, patience, presence. These are gifts that often go unnoticed, yet they are the most profound forms of love. Your Rick is giving you such a gift now. Even if he does not speak, he is with you. Morty breathed slowly, letting the rhythm of the park settle into his mind. The glowing organs reflected in his wide, awed eyes, the flowing crimson corridors, the faint hum of life everywhere. It all felt calmer under the unseen gaze of Rick. Even the unsettling aspects of the park, the fragile glass-like structures and trembling membranes, no longer inspired fear. Instead, they felt safe, as though Rick's silent watch offered a shield against the unknown. He wandered further, following the gentle guidance of the glowing corridors, yet constantly aware of Rick's presence lingering, an invisible hand on his shoulder. Every step seemed to pulse in harmony with the distant hum of the machines that Rick had left behind in the real world. Each one a reminder that his grandfather's brilliance extended beyond inventions. It extended to understanding, to care, to unspoken love. Morty came across a chamber of undulating, crimson currents that resembled rivers. The surface shimmered, reflecting stars that seemed impossible in such a confined space. And yet, as he stood there staring, he felt the warmth of Rick's watchfulness settle around him like a protective mist. The fear he had once felt in this chamber melted away. What could have been grotesque was now almost sacred, a quiet sanctuary of reflection and wonder. I never thought he could care like this, Morty murmured to himself. He's always so loud, so chaotic. But now I feel it, even when he's not saying anything. The guide hovered near him, voice almost a whisper, like the soft brushing of clouds. You are learning to see beyond the surface, Morty. Rick's watching eyes are not about control or dominance. They are about presence. He is letting you explore, letting you grow while offering the safety of his steady gaze. Most would never notice. Most would never understand. But you, Morty, are beginning to understand the quiet power of being seen and cared for. Morty stepped closer to one of the glowing organs, its surface rippling with soft, pulsating light. He felt a shiver of awe, a delicate thrill that was neither fear nor excitement, but something subtler, something deeply soothing. It's almost like he's giving me permission to feel all this, to explore, to wonder, without worrying about messing up. Yes, the guide murmured, fading slightly into the dreamlike haze of the park. That is exactly it. Sometimes to truly learn, one must feel watched, not in judgment but in trust, to be allowed to fail, to hesitate, to be uneasy, and yet still be safe. That is the gift of Rick's presence. Morty's gaze drifted to the distant corners of the park, glowing faintly, breathing softly. He imagined Rick in the real world, hunched over a strange invention, eyes occasionally lifting toward Morty's direction. Even now, in silence, he could feel the depth of Rick's care, the invisible hand, the subtle weight of love wrapped in quiet attention. He wandered along a corridor of delicate, crystalline structures, their surfaces catching the faint light like captured stars. Normally he would have been unsettled, even frightened, but the knowledge of Rick's watchful presence transformed his unease into a gentle curiosity. Each structure seemed alive, each reflection a story waiting to be understood, each shimmer a quiet invitation to linger, to notice, to reflect. Morty paused, inhaling the gentle scent of imagined life that seemed to fill the park. It's like he's giving me a space to be myself, he whispered, voice barely audible, to learn, to feel, without fear. Yes, Morty, the guide's voice hummed softly, echoing faintly through the glowing corridors. He is offering you the rarest kind of gift, trust. The trust that you can explore the unknown, encounter fragility, and still return to yourself intact. That is the essence of Rick's watching eyes. Not control, not manipulation, but steadfast care and presence. Morty allowed himself to sit for a moment, gazing at a glowing pool that reflected faint constellations. Even the trembling edges of the pool, the fragile glass-like formations, the faint hum of the park's inner currents, all seemed bathed in the soft reassurance of Rick's silent gaze. He felt his chest expand with calm, a gentle warmth spreading through him. "I never realized. Being watched could feel like being held," Morty murmured. His words hovered in the air, fragile and tentative. "But now I get it. He's not just observing. He's guiding me, without saying a word. Just being there, that's enough." The guide's light dimmed slightly, leaving Morty alone with the glowing corridors and the quiet resonance of Rick's attention. Morty took a deep breath and stood, feeling steadier, stronger, gentler. The uneasy wonder of the park had transformed again, now into a quiet assurance that he could navigate even the strangest places, even the most unsettling moments, with Rick silently beside him. And as he continued walking, the soft illumination of Anatomy Park reflecting faintly on his face, Morty understood something profound. The greatest lessons are often taught not through words or spectacle, but through presence. And for the first time, he truly felt the gentle, unwavering power of Rick's watching eyes. Morty continued along the softly glowing corridors of Anatomy Park, feeling the gentle pulse of life around him. His footsteps were light, almost floating, carried by the surreal quiet that enveloped this strange, dreamlike world. Ahead, a faint red shimmer drew his gaze, soft, luminous, and almost hypnotic. It was the river. The river of blood. At first his chest tightened. The words "river of blood" sounded alarming, even dangerous. But as he approached, Morty noticed something extraordinary. The surface of the river gleamed like polished glass, reflecting faint constellations, like stars captured in liquid. It moved gently, flowing with a calm, undulating rhythm that seemed to pulse in harmony with his own heartbeat. This isn't scary," Morty whispered softly to himself. "It's beautiful." The guide appeared beside him, voice barely above a whisper, like wind rustling through the trees in the quiet of night. "The river carries more than life's essence, Morty. It carries stories, reflections, memories. Each droplet is a fragment of existence, each current a path through time. To fear it is natural, but to see it, to truly see it, reveals the gentle poetry of life, even in its most fragile form." Morty knelt at the river's edge, fingertips brushing the smooth surface. He expected cold, maybe even discomfort. Instead, warmth radiated, subtle and reassuring. The liquid mirrored the tiny lights above, constellations in miniature, twinkling in the crimson tide. It was impossible, surreal, but in the quiet of the park, impossibility became comfort. He noticed how Rick's presence lingered still, distant but unwavering. Morty felt the silent reassurance again, like a gentle hand resting on his shoulder from across dimensions. Even as he marveled at the river, he sensed that Rick had been here before, observing the same currents, contemplating the same fragile beauty, hidden in what most would recoil from. "I never thought blood could look like this," Morty whispered. "It's calming, almost peaceful." The guide nodded softly. "It is more than mere substance. It is continuity. Every cell, every heartbeat, every life ever touched. The river holds them all. And in this calm reflection, Morty, you learn not to fear mortality, not to fear fragility. You learn to witness it, to respect it, to marvel quietly at the impermanence of everything, and yet find stability within that understanding." Morty sank to his knees beside the river, watching tiny waves ripple and dance. For a moment, he imagined his own heartbeat echoing in the currents, blending seamlessly with the flow. And somehow he understood that life, like this river, was not meant to be seized or controlled, but gently observed and appreciated. The stars reflected on the river seemed to shift subtly, bending and stretching as if reaching toward him. Morty felt a calm shiver run through him, a quiet awe that made him breathe slower, think softer. The fear that had shadowed him in earlier chambers dissipated entirely. In its place grew a deep, reflective wonder. Rick's eyes, Morty imagined, were watching still, Not demanding, not probing, just present. Even in this surreal, unsettling landscape, Rick's silent care allowed Morty to see beauty where he would have only felt dread. To be observed in love, Morty realized, could transform the most daunting of experiences into moments of quiet revelation. The guide continued softly, almost like a lullaby. This river reminds us, Morty, that even what seems terrifying can carry grace. Every drop has its story, every current its lesson. To move through fear without resistance, to see the depth and not flinch, that is courage. That is what Rick hopes you will carry beyond this park. Morty's gaze fell on a cluster of tiny glowing cells drifting near the riverbank. They shimmered like microscopic lanterns, each pulsing gently in harmony with the flowing river. It's like life itself is singing, he murmured. A quiet song. I can hear it if I just listen. The guide's figure shimmered faintly, voice brushing his ears like soft wind. Exactly. To witness, to listen, to be fully present. These are the gifts of this journey. And remember, Morty, not all guidance comes with noise or instruction. Sometimes it comes as quiet trust, as we have learned from Rick's watching eyes. Morty leaned closer to the water, watching his reflection distort and reform with the gentle undulations. He saw himself here in this strange, dreamlike body world, yet simultaneously felt the tether to his grandfather, a bond of quiet care, patience, and unspoken love. It was grounding. Even amidst surreal landscapes and unusual forms, he felt safe, held by Rick's presence. I think I understand now, Morty whispered. It's not about adventure or danger. It's about noticing, about feeling, and being seen while you do it. That's what matters. The river shimmered brighter, as though acknowledging his thought. The gentle ripple carried his reflection, fractured into hundreds of pieces, yet each fragment seemed imbued with calm, with wonder, with the reassurance that fragility could be beautiful. The crimson currents no longer seemed threatening. They were alive, gentle, and full of meaning. Morty took a deep, slow breath. I want to remember this. I want to remember what it feels like to just watch and listen, not run, not panic, just The guide's voice softened, drifting away like the final notes of a lullaby. Carry this moment with you, Morty. Let it become a memory that shapes your courage, your gentleness, and your understanding. And know that Rick watches still, a steady presence in the silence, letting you explore, yet never letting you fall completely. Morty rose from his knees, feeling steadier, lighter, and more aware. He walked along the edge of the river of blood, each step echoing softly in harmony with the river's pulse. The surreal beauty of the park, once daunting, was now transformed into a realm of reflection, learning, and quiet courage. He allowed himself a soft smile. Thank you, Rick, for watching, for being there, even when I don't see you. The river shimmered beneath him, stars dancing upon the crimson glassy currents, as if affirming his realization. Even in the strangest, most unsettling places, even amidst the surreal and the unknown, Rick's silent care had guided him to see beauty, to feel calm, to embrace the quiet strength within himself. Morty's footsteps carried him onward, the river a glowing path of reflection. And somewhere in the distant corridors of the park, he knew Rick's eyes lingered still, watching over him with steady, gentle love. Morty walked further into the softly glowing corridors of Anatomy Park, feeling the gentle pulse of the surreal landscape beneath him. The river of blood had left a lingering warmth in his chest, a quiet reminder that beauty could exist even in the strangest of places. Each step he took echoed lightly, as if the park itself were breathing in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Ahead, the path widened into an open expanse, where the park's structures seemed to shimmer more vividly. Organs glowed faintly, walls pulsed softly, and tiny streams of bioluminescent fluid traced delicate patterns along the floor. Morty paused, taking in the serenity of it all. For a moment it felt as if time itself had slowed, stretching each second into a soft, reflective eternity. Then, faint tremors rippled through the park. Morty froze, uncertainty tightening his chest. The walls quivered, the floors shifted ever so slightly, and tiny particles of glowing matter floated gently into the air. "Is it collapsing?" he whispered, voice barely audible. His heart began to race, not with fear but with anticipation of the unknown. The guide appeared beside him, calm and steady. "Do not fear, Morty," the figure whispered. "This is not destruction. This is transformation. Even when things tremble, even when they shift, there is a rhythm, a gentle unfolding. Observe and you will understand." Morty watched closely as the structures seemed to ripple and fold upon themselves. Organs tilted softly, fluid streams merged and separated, and every movement was slow, deliberate, and almost musical. The park was alive, not in a chaotic way, but in a gentle, breathing, evolving way. It was as if the park were a living poem, constantly reshaping itself, each motion an expression of quiet life. He knelt down, placing a hand on the nearest glowing surface. The tremor passed through him, soft and comforting like sand slipping slowly through his fingers. There was no danger here, no urgency, only the subtle reminder that life and even the places we think are permanent are ever changing. "It's beautiful," Morty murmured, letting the soft tremors flow through him, "like it's alive. And it's just moving in its own way." The guide nodded, voice soft like a lullaby. "Yes, Morty, the gentle collapse teaches a quiet truth: nothing is fixed. Everything flows, shifts, and transforms. To witness this without panic, to feel the rhythm of change without resistance, that is courage. That is wisdom." Morty stood slowly, taking in the full expanse of the park as it folded and swayed. He realized that each trembling wall, each softly shifting corridor carried a lesson. Change was not something to be feared. It was a part of life, as essential as the river he had just witnessed. And when embraced with calm awareness, it could reveal beauty in forms he had never noticed before. As he walked forward, he noticed small, delicate fragments of the structures drifting through the air. They glimmered faintly, like tiny stars caught in a slow, graceful dance. Morty reached out, letting the fragments brush against his fingers. They left a faint warmth, a soft pulse that resonated with his heartbeat. He smiled quietly to himself. Even in moments of collapse, life offered small touches of comfort, reminders of gentle continuity. The guide's presence remained beside him, steady and reassuring. "Remember, Morty," the voice said, "the world, the body, even the universe itself often appears chaotic. But if you slow your gaze, soften your mind, and simply observe, you discover patterns, rhythms, and beauty hidden within." Morty nodded, taking a slow, deliberate breath. He imagined the tremors not as collapse, but as dance, a gentle, flowing ballet of light and form. Each subtle movement was a heartbeat, a whisper, a story told in the softest language of the park. And in this quiet observation, he felt a sense of peace washing over him, a deep understanding that even the most unsettling changes could carry lessons of calm and reflection. He paused by a softly glowing archway, watching as the park seemed to fold gently upon itself. Light spilled from the edges, casting a warm, ethereal glow across the corridor. Morty felt the familiar presence of Rick nearby, not touching, not speaking, but simply watching. The awareness of his grandfather's silent care gave him strength, a quiet anchor in the shifting landscape. Morty whispered to himself, "It's okay to let go. It's okay to just be here right now." The guide smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Yes, Morty. To let go is not to surrender fearlessly, but to embrace what is with awareness and presence. Courage is not loud. It is soft, enduring, and persistent, like the slow tremor of this park." Morty continued walking, feeling the rhythm of the park pulse beneath his feet. Every trembling wall, every folding corridor, every drifting fragment reinforced the gentle wisdom he was gathering. He realized that change was not something to resist, but something to witness, to honor, and to let flow. In this space, even collapse carried grace, and every moment of unease was transformed into an opportunity for quiet understanding. The river he had passed earlier shimmered faintly in the distance, reflecting light across the trembling landscape. Morty noticed how its currents mirrored the soft tremors around him, how the gentle flow and the subtle collapse coexisted in harmony. He felt a deep connection to both, the river and the tremors, as lessons of life's impermanence and gentle continuity. Taking another slow, measured breath, Morty whispered, "I understand now. The world, it changes. And that's okay. It's beautiful even when it shifts." The guide nodded one final time. "Carry this truth, Morty. Let it stay with you. Let it guide you in the quiet moments, in the unexpected tremors of your own life. Observe, accept, and find peace within." Morty smiled softly, feeling lighter, steadier, and more at ease than he had in hours. The gentle collapse of Anatomy Park had not shaken him, it had transformed him. He understood the rhythm of life, the beauty of impermanence, and the quiet courage that comes from simply being present. As he walked onward, the tremors subsided, leaving behind a calm, glowing park, full of soft light and faint whispers. Morty knew that he was learning, quietly and deeply, lessons that would carry him beyond this dreamlike journey. And somewhere just beyond his sight, Rick's eyes lingered, steady and caring, silently guiding him through the delicate, tender dance of Anatomy Park. Morty walked slowly through the softly trembling corridors of Anatomy Park, each step deliberate, as though he were tracing a path between the beating hearts and glowing structures around him. The gentle collapse of the park had left a subtle rhythm in the air, a cadence that seemed to resonate with his own heartbeat. For the first time, Morty felt a quiet harmony in the strange, luminous world surrounding him. The guide appeared beside him once more, their presence calm and unwavering. "Morty," the figure whispered, voice soft like a lullaby. "You have witnessed the gentle collapse, the shifting and folding of this park. But there is something more you must understand. This journey is not a tale of amusement nor of fear. It is a story of mortality." Morty's eyebrows furrowed gently, curiosity stirring in the softness of his chest. "Mortality?" he echoed, his voice barely audible. I don't understand. Is this about dying?" The guide smiled faintly, warm and patient. "Not death as you fear it, Morty. Death is only one small part of the story. This journey is about understanding the fragility of life, the delicate balance that exists within every being. Just as the park trembles and folds, so too does every heart, every body, every soul. To witness this is to learn reverence, to recognize the sacredness in all things." Morty paused, letting the words settle in the quiet glow of the park. The crimson rivers, the softly pulsing organs, the drifting fragments of light, all of it seemed to take on a new significance. Each trembling wall, each gentle shift was not chaos, but a quiet reminder of impermanence. And within that impermanence lay a profound beauty, one that demanded both awareness and compassion. He turned to the guide, eyes wide but calm. "So, everything here, it's teaching me about life, about how fragile it all is?" "Yes," the guide whispered, their tone both gentle and insistent. "Fragility is not weakness, it is truth. It is the reason to cherish each moment, each heartbeat, each connection. To understand this is to carry courage within yourself, a quiet, enduring strength that does not shout but whispers. Courage is not in conquering, Morty. Courage is in observing, in being present, in loving what is fleeting." Morty nodded slowly, the words sinking deep into his chest. He thought of the gentle collapse, the soft tremors, the way every structure in the park had moved and shifted without losing its essence. Change, he realized, was not a threat. It was a rhythm, a gentle flow of life that must be honored, not resisted. They walked together down a corridor illuminated by soft, bioluminescent veins. Morty's eyes caught the reflection of stars upon the red glass of the river of blood, their twinkle mirrored in the faint pulse of the park. He took a slow, steady breath, letting the sense of quiet awe settle over him. Here in this strange and luminous body, he felt the delicate weight of existence, the interconnectedness of all things, and the gentle courage that comes from simply being. The guide gestured to a nearby chamber, its walls rippling with soft light. "Inside this room you will see the truth of all beings. Each structure, each cell, each fragment you pass carries a story, a memory, a life lived, a breath taken. They remind us that we are never truly alone, that every touch, every moment, every presence has meaning." Morty stepped inside, feeling the warmth of the soft glow surrounding him. Tiny whispers filled the air, subtle and melodic like the faintest fragments of a lullaby. He realized that these were echoes of life, soft memories of existence that lingered long after the moments had passed. Every flicker of light, every pulse, seemed to speak of resilience, love, and quiet courage. He sat down gently on the cool, glowing floor, letting the soft hum of the park fill him. "I think I understand," he whispered. This isn't just a park. It's life. It's teaching me to see what's important even when it's small, even when it's fragile." The guide knelt beside him, eyes kind and steady. "Yes, Morty, you are learning to see the sacredness in impermanence, to find courage in stillness, to recognize that the fragility of life is what makes it precious. And when you return to your world, carry this understanding with you. Let it shape the way you live, the way you listen, the way you love. Morty smiled softly, feeling a warmth bloom in his chest. He thought of Rick, observing silently from afar, of the family waiting outside, of the quiet moments of life he often overlooked. Everything seemed more vibrant now, more tender, more worthy of gentle attention. The park had revealed its secret not through spectacle, but through stillness, reflection, and reverent observation. He rose slowly, the glow of the chamber wrapping him in light. I'll remember, he whispered. I'll remember that courage isn't loud. That life is fragile, and that's okay. That's beautiful. The guide nodded, a serene smile gracing their face. And now, Morty, the park will rest. It has shared its wisdom with you. Its lessons will linger in your heart, as all lessons of life do. Remember this, and you will carry its truth with quiet strength. Morty took one last look around, letting the soft tremors, the glowing corridors, and the faint whispers imprint upon his memory. He felt lighter, steadier, and more at peace than he had in hours. Anatomy Park was not merely a place of strange adventure. It was a teacher, a gentle guide, a soft reminder that every life, every moment, every heartbeat was sacred and fleeting. As he walked toward the exit, he felt the presence of the guide fade softly, leaving him with a calm, glowing understanding. He would carry the stranger's truth with him forever, that courage and grace exist not in spectacle, but in quiet awareness. That mortality is not a threat, but a teacher, and that even in the most unexpected and surreal places, life can reveal its deepest wisdom, softly and patiently, to those willing to listen. Morty paused at the softly glowing corridor, letting the gentle hum of Anatomy Park settle around him. The whispers of organs and faint luminescence of veins created a rhythm almost like a heartbeat, steady and unhurried. For the first time, Morty realized that listening itself could be a form of courage. It was quiet, unobtrusive, yet immensely powerful. He sat down near a cluster of softly pulsing cells, his back leaning against a warm, luminescent wall. The guide's words from earlier lingered in his mind. Courage is in observing, in being present, in loving what is fleeting. Morty inhaled slowly, feeling the cool, comforting air of the park brush past him. He listened, not just with his ears, but with his entire being. The faint sounds of the park's inner workings became a symphony, each vibration a note in a lullaby of life. Morty could hear the delicate flutter of the heart, the slow, deliberate circulation of blood through the translucent veins, and even the tiny whispers of cells communicating with one another. Every sound was gentle, rhythmic, a reassurance that life moved forward quietly and gracefully. He reflected on Rick's presence as well. Though the scientist was elsewhere, observing silently from a distance, Morty could feel the weight of his gaze, not in judgment, but in care. Rick had never been one for soft words or overt tenderness, yet here in this surreal body, Morty felt the unspoken connection between them. Listening, he realized, was not passive. It was a bridge of understanding, a way to reach out without speaking. The corridors shimmered with a soft, diffused light, bathing Morty in hues of deep crimson and gentle amber. He focused on the flowing rivers of blood, watching the reflections of distant stars mirrored in their smooth surfaces. Each reflection carried a quiet story, memories embedded in the tiniest structures of the body. Morty understood now that listening was more than hearing. It was feeling, noticing, and valuing what was fragile and transient. A gentle breeze, or perhaps it was the subtle movement of the park itself, passed over him, carrying a scent faintly metallic but sweet in its own way. Morty closed his eyes, allowing the sensations to settle in his mind. He remembered the guide's voice, "Stillness is courage," and he felt it. The courage to remain calm, to observe, to honor the delicate balance of life around him. As he sat, he began to notice small details he had overlooked before, the way the walls of the park pulsed softly, the faint glimmer of nutrients flowing through tiny vessels, the gentle flicker of light reflecting off membranes. These were not chaotic or frightening. They were tender, like a quiet lullaby, reminding him that life, even in its most bizarre forms, could be serene and beautiful. Morty thought of the world outside, of the rush and noise that often consumed his days. Here in the heart of Anatomy Park, He realized that presence was a gift. The simple act of listening, of observing without interruption, was a kindness to oneself and to the world. He felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet joy that had nothing to do with adventure, chaos, or fear. Rick's distant eyes seemed to follow him, a reminder that love and guidance do not always announce themselves loudly. Morty understood that Rick's care, though often hidden under sarcasm and scientific obsession, was genuine. He felt a warmth in his chest, a connection strengthened not by words or actions, but by the shared silence of understanding. The rivers of red, glass-like blood shimmered as Morty traced his gaze along their flow. Each tiny ripple reflected stars, memories, and fragments of life. He listened to the subtle creaks and shifts of the park, feeling the echoes of life within every structure. Morty realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to remain present despite it. By listening, he became part of this delicate rhythm, a silent participant in the gentle dance of existence. Time seemed to stretch, soft and unhurried. Morty allowed himself to sink deeper into the experience, his body and mind attuning to the quiet symphony around him. Every pulse, every flicker of light, every soft whisper of the park's life forms became a teacher. He understood, in a way that words could never fully capture, that life was precious not because it was grand or loud, but because it was fragile, fleeting, and endlessly interconnected. He thought of the guide, now gone, but leaving its teachings embedded in every corner of the park. Morty smiled faintly, a soft, peaceful smile that had nothing to do with amusement or mischief, but with comprehension and quiet awe. He realized that listening could be an act of love, a gentle acknowledgement of the beauty and fragility of all things. The corridor ahead shimmered faintly, a soft beacon guiding him onward. Morty rose slowly, carrying the lessons of stillness and observation with him. Every step was measured, deliberate, a continuation of the courage he had discovered by simply listening. He felt a connection to Rick, to the park, to the lives and stories hidden within every structure. It was a bond formed in silence, in attention, in presence. As Morty moved forward, he carried the soft glow of understanding within him. He knew that when he returned to the world outside, he would remember this feeling, this courage, this reverence for fragility. The park had not only taught him about the body, but about life, love, and the quiet power of listening. And in that gentle moment, Morty felt the true depth of Rick's care, the subtle guidance that had led him here. Listening was not passive. Listening was brave. Listening was the bridge between fear and understanding, between chaos and calm, between fleeting moments and eternal truths. Morty smiled again, eyes closed for a brief instant, feeling the warmth of the park's gentle hum around him. He would carry this lesson forward, softly, steadily, like the glow of a lantern in the dark. And though the park's corridors would eventually fade from view, the courage born from stillness and attention would remain in his heart, a quiet, enduring flame. Morty drifted slowly through the winding pathways of Anatomy Park, the glow from the bioluminescent structures casting a soft, dreamlike light over his path. Each step felt as if it carried him deeper into a space where the boundaries between the physical and the emotional blurred. The park was quiet now, yet it was alive with whispers that Morty couldn't quite hear, murmurs of a life's worth of experiences lingering gently in the air. He felt the weight of these unseen stories, not with fear but with a quiet awe that settled warmly in his chest. Every structure seemed to hum with memory. The tiny, delicate organs held not just their function, but a trace of moments that had passed through them, moments of joy, of struggle, of fleeting laughter, and quiet tears. Morty could almost feel them as vibrations beneath his fingers, as if touching these spaces allowed him to brush against someone's forgotten thoughts. It was strange and yet profoundly comforting. The city of cells around him pulsed softly, like the steady rhythm of a lullaby, a quiet song of existence that spoke to the heart more than the mind. He paused at a transparent wall, peering in at a cluster of microscopic activity that seemed impossibly intricate. Tiny particles moved in synchronized patterns, forming loops and arcs, their motions telling stories he could not fully understand but could somehow feel. Morty closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the hum of life wash over him. In this quiet he realized that every organism, Every living being carried its own echo. Every cell, every heartbeat, every passing thought became a note in a symphony too subtle to hear with ears alone. Morty's thoughts drifted to his own life, to moments he had overlooked in the rush of daily chaos. How many of these small fleeting experiences left echoes in the world, invisible yet persistent? The gentle light of Anatomy Park seemed to answer him, bathing him in a calm reminder that nothing truly vanished. Even the tiniest gesture, the quietest word, could ripple across time in ways one might never fully comprehend. Here, inside this surreal body, the echoes were visible, tangible, and profoundly moving. A soft breeze, or perhaps a whisper carried in the surreal air, brushed Morty's face. It reminded him of the guide's calm voice from earlier, a voice that had seemed to float effortlessly, unbound by walls or distance. Every life leaves a trace, the thought seemed to murmur. Every moment matters, even when unseen. Morty nodded, even though he was alone. He didn't need to speak. The understanding settled within him naturally, a quiet resonance that echoed through his own chest, mingling with the park's gentle pulse. As he continued along the translucent corridors, Morty began noticing patterns in the faint luminescence around him. Some areas shimmered more brightly than others, subtle clusters of memory forming miniature constellations along the walls. He realized these were echoes of particularly poignant moments, perhaps joys so vivid they refused to fade, perhaps sorrows that lingered as gentle shadows. There was no hierarchy, no judgment, only a delicate balance of all that life had been and all it would continue to be. Morty could feel the humility in it, a soft, profound lesson whispered not in words, but in the cadence of existence itself. Morty's journey through the park was slow, deliberate. Each step was meditative, each glance an acknowledgement of the fragile yet resilient beauty surrounding him. He paused by a gently curving wall that resembled the intricate folds of a brain, the glow within illuminating threads of connection that crisscrossed in elegant complexity. Here, he imagined, lay the collective experiences, memories, and emotions that shaped the being he was visiting. And somehow, in this quiet dreamscape, Morty sensed the universality of it all. The echoes of life in one body reflected a larger pattern, a web connecting countless lives, countless small joys and sorrows that together formed the tapestry of existence. A sudden shimmer caught his eye, an area of the park where the glow was particularly warm and bright. Morty stepped closer, and he saw miniature cells performing intricate dances, each movement deliberate, precise, and yet fluid, like tiny performers moving to a rhythm older than time. He could feel the emotion of the life contained here, resilience, persistence, the innate desire to continue, to adapt, to endure. Morty understood in that soft, wordless way that only the heart can comprehend, that even the most fleeting lives leave lasting impressions, echoes that might never be fully known but are eternally felt. He leaned against a nearby wall, closing his eyes and letting the warmth of the park wash over him. Here, surrounded by these tender, shimmering manifestations of life, Morty felt a quiet courage growing within him. Courage not in the form of daring deeds or loud heroics, but in the ability to observe, to care, and to recognize the delicate threads connecting all beings. This understanding, he realized, was as profound as any adventure he had ever undertaken with Rick, and perhaps even more vital. In the gentle hum and soft light of Anatomy Park, Morty felt a whisper of the infinite, the echo of every life that had come before and every life yet to come. He saw that care, compassion, and stillness were forces just as powerful as any invention or discovery, and in that moment, he understood the quiet truth Rick had been trying to teach all along. The world was vast, strange, and unpredictable, but the echoes of life, the tenderness we extend, and the patience we hold for others could guide even the most lost traveler back to warmth and understanding. As he moved onward, leaving the brightest glow behind and stepping into a softer, deeper light, Morty carried the echoes with him, not as a burden, but as a gift. The park was alive, but it was not chaotic. It was a sanctuary. Every memory, every pulse of life, every silent story he had witnessed became a gentle lullaby that would accompany him even after he awoke. And for the first time, Morty felt that sense of peace, the kind that grows quietly, without clamor, without rush, and yet resonates through the deepest parts of the heart. With one final glance at the shimmering walls, Morty whispered to himself, though no one could hear. I will remember. I will carry these echoes with me, and I will move gently as life intended. The park, the bodies, the memories, all of it rested in calm continuity. And Morty, too, moved forward with a soft courage, a quiet wisdom, and a heart a little fuller than before. Rick stood silently at the edge of the glowing pathways, watching Morty drift further into Anatomy Park's gentle luminescence. The soft light from the bioluminescent organs reflected faintly in his eyes, revealing a tension he rarely allowed anyone to see. He had always been the one in control, the mind behind every invention, the voice of reason and chaos alike. But now, in the quiet, he felt a weight pressing softly yet insistently on his chest. Not fear of science, not fear of failure, but something far more intimate, the fear of letting go. For a moment, Rick's mind wandered back to his younger self, a boy in a lab coat too large for him, tinkering with gadgets that hummed and whirred like little companions. He remembered the first time he had understood the fragility of life, not through some grand experiment, but in a small unnoticed moment when a friend had left, quietly without explanation, and the world had seemed emptier for it. That emptiness had never truly left him. It had settled deep within, hiding beneath layers of humor, intellect, and bravado. Tonight, as he watched Morty move through the park, Rick felt that old unease rise again, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what mattered beyond his inventions: connection, presence, and the courage to face endings. The park around him hummed softly, each organ's glow casting delicate shadows across Rick's furrowed brow. He could hear the faint echoes of Morty's journey, the soft steps, the light whispers, the faint exhalations of wonder and curiosity. And yet, beneath it all, Rick felt the tremor of uncertainty. He had guided Morty here, yes, but the lessons of stillness, of understanding fragility, were not ones that could be taught with science alone. They required vulnerability, a willingness to confront one's own limitations, to acknowledge that not every outcome could be engineered or predicted. And that thought, simple, quiet, human, was what made his chest tighten now. Rick took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the air cool against his face. He glanced around, as though the soft walls of Anatomy Park might offer him some reassurance. The faint luminescence danced over his hands accustomed to manipulating reality itself, yet now feeling strangely powerless. Powerlessness, he realized, was not weakness. It was a revelation. The courage to observe, to stand silently while another faced a journey of discovery, was a different kind of strength. And as he watched Morty pause to admire a glowing artery, Rick felt a surge of protective care he could not fully articulate, a love expressed not in words but in the quiet vigilance of his presence. In the midst of these reflections, a memory floated to the surface, one he had tucked away for decades. A friend from his youth, someone who had always understood the balance between curiosity and caution, had once whispered a simple truth. "Rick, you can know the universe, but it will always know more of you than you do of it." He had laughed then, dismissing it as a quaint observation. But now, watching Morty navigate the surreal beauty of the human body, he understood. The universe, the park, even the life inside these walls, they were teachers in forms subtle and profound. And his greatest fear, he realized, was not death, not failure, not chaos. It was missing the quiet lessons that mattered most. Rick's eyes softened as he observed Morty moving carefully along the translucent pathways, carrying the soft glow of his lantern. He noticed how Morty's small gestures, pausing to admire the shimmer of a cell, listening intently to the guide's calm explanations, mirrored the patience and gentleness Rick had rarely allowed himself to practice. He felt pride, yes, but intertwined with a tender anxiety. What if he failed to recognize the depth of this moment? What if, in his habitual rush, he overlooked the very lessons he had spent a lifetime discovering? A soft exhalation escaped Rick's lips, almost imperceptible as he leaned slightly forward. He was alone, yet surrounded by echoes of life, the same echoes Morty had been absorbing. The park whispered of resilience, fragility, and enduring connection. Rick felt those whispers touch him deeply, stirring emotions he had long kept at bay. His fear was no longer abstract. It was intimate, human, and entirely inevitable. The fear of letting go of control, the fear of not being present enough, the fear of losing touch with the very relationships that grounded him. It was all here, humming softly in the light. Rick's mind wandered briefly to Beth, to Summer, to the fleeting moments of tenderness he had shared with his family. Even in their imperfections, he had seen traces of wisdom and love, small yet enduring. And now, in the quiet of Anatomy Park, he realized that the courage to stay present, to witness without intervening, was a gift he could offer Morty, and, by extension, himself. It was a different kind of adventure, one that required patience, humility, and an openness to the unknown. He adjusted his stance, letting the soft glow from Morty's lantern bathe his face. It was a gentle reminder that guidance did not always mean control, that watching and caring could be expressed without interference. The fear that had gnawed at him, the fear of missing the profound simplicity of being present, softened slightly, tempered by understanding. Rick knew now that the quiet observation he practiced tonight was as vital as any experiment, any interdimensional journey. He was learning slowly the same lesson he hoped Morty was absorbing. That courage was often silent, and wisdom was sometimes found not in grand actions, but in gentle attentiveness. Rick exhaled fully, the tension in his chest easing as he embraced the realization. He would not be reckless. He would not force lessons or truths. Instead, he would allow Morty the space to grow, to see, to feel, and to understand. And in doing so, Rick himself found a measure of peace, a quiet acceptance that not all knowledge needed to be wielded, that some truths were discovered in the stillness between words, in the gentle observation of life unfolding. As the soft luminescence of Anatomy Park surrounded him, Rick allowed a rare smile to touch his lips, not a triumphant grin, but a tender acknowledgement of the quiet courage blossoming within both himself and Morty. He had faced fear tonight, not the fear of danger, but the fear of impermanence, of the subtle and profound responsibilities of care. And in facing it, he realized that courage and love were entwined in ways he had never fully admitted before. Rick turned slightly, eyes following Morty's drifting figure, and whispered quietly to himself, though no one could hear, "I see you, Morty, and I will be here even in silence." And with that acknowledgement, a small weight lifted from his heart, leaving a space for gentle understanding, for presence, and for the quiet wonder of life's ongoing journey. Morty held the soft, glowing lantern carefully in his hands, feeling the gentle warmth pulse like a heartbeat. Its light was subtle, barely illuminating the immediate path, yet enough to cast faint shadows across the strange, surreal walls of Anatomy Park. Every curve of an organ, every delicate membrane reflected the glow, as if the entire park was breathing along with him. It was not frightening. It was a quiet reassurance, a guide through the intricate maze of the human body, and perhaps more importantly, through the labyrinth of understanding, memory, and mortality. The lantern seemed almost alive, a companion whispering that Morty was not alone. Even in the vast strangeness of this inner world, he remembered Rick's eyes from afar, watching with that rare softness that conveyed care without words. Morty felt a small steady comfort from the knowledge that Rick's vigilance was invisible but constant, like gravity or the slow rotation of the stars. He had come here with curiosity, tinged with hesitation, but now, holding this small beacon, he understood that journeys were often made meaningful by the quiet act of observation, by noticing what others might overlook. As Morty walked, the faint luminescence revealed forgotten structures of the park, tiny, intricate parts of the body he had never imagined. Each one seemed to hum its own story, whispering of time lived, choices made, and the fleeting nature of all things. He paused at a delicate network of veins, marveling at the subtle beauty of their patterns. The lantern's light made the veins shimmer softly, like rivers of liquid gold. Morty could almost hear their silent song, a melody of fragility and resilience intertwined. It was as if the park itself was alive not only with cells and tissues, but with memories, each one glowing gently in the dim light. Morty's thoughts drifted to the meaning of the lantern. It was not just a physical object, but a symbol. It was memory, hope, and guidance rolled into one quiet presence. With each step, he realized that the act of carrying it was an act of mindfulness, a commitment to see and appreciate the intricate details that often went unnoticed. Morty thought of the people he loved, Beth, Summer, and even Rick in his distant brilliance. Their faces came to mind, not as immediate concerns or worries, but as gentle anchors, reminding him of the warmth and connection that existed beyond the luminescent walls of Anatomy Park. The park's gentle whispers seemed to encourage him to move slowly, to take in the subtle beauty, and reflect on the lessons each space offered. Morty's eyes, closed briefly in meditation, flickered open again to the soft glow illuminating a vast chamber of the heart. The lantern cast long, delicate shadows, revealing the rhythmic movement of the organ, as though it were breathing alongside him. Morty understood in that quiet instant that life was both delicate and resilient, a balance of fragility and strength that required attention, care, and gentle reverence. A soft echo caught Morty's attention, the guide, appearing briefly beside him, smiling without words. The guide gestured to the lantern, and Morty felt a profound understanding settle in his chest. The lantern was a metaphor, yes, but also a tool, a reminder that memory illuminated the path, and that even in the darkest or most unfamiliar places, light could be carried, shared, and nurtured. Morty walked on, feeling the lantern's warmth like a soft hand in his own, steadying him as he navigated the winding paths and quiet corridors of the park. Rick's eyes followed from afar, and he allowed himself a rare private exhale. He had taught Morty many things through words and inventions, but the true lesson, seeing and honoring life, embracing stillness, holding care and love as steady guides, was unfolding silently before him. Rick understood more fully than he could say aloud that the lantern was not simply Morty's. It was a reflection of the wisdom and vigilance that Rick had spent a lifetime cultivating. Hidden beneath layers of humor, genius, and occasional recklessness, Morty reached a chamber bathed in soft crimson light, the river of blood flowing gently like molten glass. He held the lantern close, watching the reflections of its glow ripple across the surface. The scene was strange, even surreal, yet not frightening. It was comforting, a reminder that even in the deepest currents of life, its literal and metaphorical rivers, there was beauty, continuity, and the gentle guidance of memory. Morty understood, with the lantern in his hands, that every moment was illuminated by the attention and care he offered, and by the unseen guardians who loved him quietly. The guide's voice, soft as a lullaby, murmured beside him, "Every step you take, every light you carry, honors the life that flows around you. Remember this, and you carry both courage and tenderness." Morty felt the truth of it settle in his chest, a warm reassurance that courage was not always loud or dramatic, but could be found in the quiet, deliberate act of noticing, of holding, of carrying forward what mattered. The lantern became more than light. It became a promise, to see, to remember, to protect, and to honor the delicate tapestry of existence. Morty's journey continued, each step illuminated by the gentle glow. The lantern revealed tiny wonders, cells pulsating softly, organs humming with the quiet music of life, and pathways that intertwined like whispered secrets. Morty understood now that he was part of this rhythm, that observation, care, and presence were themselves forms of adventure, as vital as any of the wild, interdimensional exploits he and Rick had embarked upon. And in that realization, he felt a new steadiness, a calm courage that would carry him through challenges, not with reckless energy, but with attentive care and mindful love. As Morty moved forward, the lantern's glow seemed to expand, touching spaces beyond its physical reach. It was a gentle reminder that memory, light, and care were not confined. They radiated outward, connecting him to Rick, to the guide, and to every life quietly pulsing within the park. Morty understood the profound simplicity of what he carried, that even a small source of light, held with intention, could illuminate the vastest and most intricate places, guiding both the holder and those around them. He paused once more, letting the lantern hang gently in his hands. The park was still, alive with whispers, reflections, and luminescent shadows. Morty realized that he had grown, subtly and quietly, through this act of carrying light, not for spectacle, but for understanding, care, and reflection. The lantern was not just an object. It was a companion, a teacher, and a symbol of the tender courage that existed within him, and all who choose to notice, to honor and to preserve the fragile beauty of life. Morty held it close, letting its warmth seep into his fingers, into his chest, and into the quiet spaces of his mind. He felt gratitude for Rick, for the guide, and for the park itself. Every luminescent glow, every subtle hum, every whispered story of life and fragility had been a lesson carried gently by memory and observation. Morty understood now that this journey was not about grandeur, spectacle, or achievement, but about noticing, holding, and illuminating the quiet truths that mattered most. And as he walked onward, the lantern's soft glow lighting his path, Morty whispered to himself, almost as a promise, "I will carry this light, for those who guide me, for those I love, and for the fragile beauty of life itself." The park shimmered softly in response, as if acknowledging that Morty's understanding was now part of its eternal rhythm, a quiet harmony of memory, courage, and gentle illumination. Morty paused in the soft glow of the lantern, the gentle hum of Anatomy Park surrounding him like a lullaby. Every corridor he had wandered whispered of life and memory, but here, in this quiet chamber, the air itself seemed to thrum with reverence. At the center lay the crown, a delicate lattice of luminous veins and fragile filaments, glimmering faintly like glass kissed by moonlight. Morty's breath caught as he stepped closer, feeling the calm insistence of the park urging him to move with care, with reverence. He knelt, hands hovering over the crown's intricate curves. It was fragile, yes, but alive, not fragile in weakness but in beauty, in its demanding of gentleness. Each filament seemed to pulse with the faint echo of all that had passed through the park. The laughter of cells dividing, the whispers of memories held in tissue, the quiet sigh of life itself. Morty understood in a way words could not capture that fragility was a form of power, a sacred balance between existence and care. The guide appeared beside him, a silhouette softened by the warm glow. "Fragility is not a failing," the guide said softly. "It is the very measure of care. To hold it in your awareness, to move gently among it, is to honor life itself." Morty nodded slowly, absorbing the truth in the calm cadence of the voice. He had always thought courage was loud, flamboyant, measured by grand gestures. But here, in the crown's luminous lattice, he felt a quieter bravery, the courage to notice, to protect, to respect. As he leaned closer, Morty traced his gaze along the delicate threads, noting how they intertwined, how one strand supported another, how the tiniest rupture could ripple across the whole. And yet, despite its apparent delicacy, the crown endured. It endured because of care, because of attention, because of someone or something that had understood its worth. Morty felt a warmth bloom in his chest, a reverence he had never known before. Life was fragile, yes, but in that fragility lay a brilliance that demanded recognition, reflection, and respect. Rick's presence, though distant, lingered like the soft hum of a familiar instrument. Morty sensed him watching, not with judgment, not with critique, but with quiet acknowledgement. Even Rick, for all his cosmic adventures and scientific recklessness, had come to understand the subtle power of gentleness, the quiet courage of attending to fragility. Morty realized that the lessons of the crown were not just for him. They were for anyone willing to see, to pause, to honor what seemed delicate and unassuming. The lantern's glow reflected in the crown's curves, casting soft, dancing lights across Morty's face. He thought of his family, of Rick, of all the moments where care had been quiet, invisible, yet profoundly impactful. Each memory seemed to hum along with the crown, a subtle melodic accompaniment to the lesson unfolding in his heart. Morty's fingers brushed the air above the crown, careful not to disturb its intricate balance, feeling the reverence of all that it represented: life, choice, memory, and the invisible threads that bound them together. The guide spoke again, voice like wind over still water. "Fragility is not weakness, Morty. It is strength tempered by attention. To notice it, to move among it carefully, is a form of courage unmatched by any sword or machine." Morty closed his eyes, breathing in the calm, letting the truth sink in. He thought of every time he had felt overwhelmed, uncertain, or lost. He realized that courage had always been there in small acts, holding a hand, listening, paying attention, caring even when it went unnoticed. Slowly, he stood, circling the crown to observe it from every angle. Each perspective revealed new subtleties. The way a single strand held up countless others, the gentle rhythm of pulsing light like a heartbeat, the way it seemed to respond to the lantern's glow as if acknowledging Morty's presence. He felt a swell of quiet pride, not for himself, but for the universe's subtle intelligence. its insistence on balance, on care, on fragile brilliance that endured against all odds. Rick's eyes followed him from afar, and in them, Morty saw a reflection of what he had always admired: intelligence paired with tenderness, curiosity balanced with quiet respect, brilliance that knew when to pause and observe rather than dominate. Morty felt gratitude for this guidance, for the silent lessons of presence and care that transcended words, that existed in actions and attention, and the space between one breath and the next. Morty whispered softly, almost as if afraid to break the crown's spell. Fragility is strength, care is courage, and to notice it, to carry it gently, is to honor life. The crown's glow seemed to respond, intensifying ever so slightly as if recognizing the understanding blooming in him. In that recognition, Morty felt a connection to the vastness of the park, to the bodies it represented, and to the quiet universe of lives intertwined within him, around him, and beyond him. He lingered a moment longer, letting the lantern's light trace the crown's curves, imprinting the lesson on his mind and heart. Every filament, every glow seemed to echo with the quiet insistence of living well, with awareness and tenderness. He understood that this crown was more than a structure in Anatomy Park. It was a mirror of the world outside, of hearts and minds, of moments that required gentleness, mindfulness, and the courage to honor fragility wherever it appeared. Finally, Morty stepped back, feeling a sense of completion and awakening. The guide's voice, gentle and fading, floated in the air. Remember, Morty, to carry fragility carefully, to honor it always, and to allow its light to guide your steps. This is the crown of life itself. Morty nodded, holding the lantern high, letting its glow mingle with the crown's soft luminescence. He walked forward through the park, carrying not just light but understanding, empathy, and the quiet courage that comes from seeing the world's delicate beauty and choosing to care. As Morty moved away, the crown shimmered softly, undisturbed yet transformed, reflecting not just the lantern, but the profound awareness it had inspired. He knew that this lesson would travel with him beyond the park, beyond Christmas Eve, beyond the surreal corridors of Anatomy Park, into the gentle rhythms of the life he lived, the care he offered, and the quiet courage he would hold forevermore. Morty paused at the crossroads of Anatomy Park, the faint glow of his lantern tracing the winding pathways ahead. The soft hum of the organs around him was a lullaby, steady and comforting, as if the park itself were breathing quietly in sync with him. Ahead the guide appeared again, though this time their form seemed even more delicate, more ephemeral, like a reflection in still water. Morty felt a gentle heaviness in his chest, the kind that comes from realizing a lesson is about to close, a presence about to leave. The guide stepped forward, their voice like the soft rustle of leaves in a midnight forest. "It is time for me to go, Morty," they said. "Calm and warm, but remember, I am always with you in memory and understanding, and in the quiet choices you make each day." Morty nodded slowly, absorbing the truth without needing to speak. He realized that some departures were not endings, but invitations to carry what mattered forward. Ali. Like holding a lantern in the dark, he remembered the guide's first appearance, how they had moved through the park with quiet purpose, never rushing, never demanding, only illuminating the path for him. Every explanation, every whisper of wisdom had settled gently in Morty's mind, like soft snow landing on still earth. The guide's farewell felt no different, gentle, unhurried, resonant with meaning, but it carried a weight, a gravity born not of sorrow, but of profound connection. Morty stepped closer, holding the lantern high, its soft light mingling with the glow of the park's surreal organs and structures. I understand," he whispered. Though the words felt small against the immensity of what he had learned, the guide nodded, a faint smile touching their features. "Understanding is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is simply remembering to care, to notice and to move gently through life. That is the courage you carry now." Morty felt a warmth spread through him, a mix of gratitude, calm, and the kind of quiet awe that makes the world feel larger and yet intimately connected. He thought of Rick, watching from afar, and how this journey, so strange, so surreal, had been about far more than the park itself. It had been about empathy, attention, and the courage to witness fragility without fear. The guide had been a companion not just through the park, but through the hidden corridors of understanding and care. They moved together toward the center of the park, where the soft light pooled like a calm lake. Morty sensed that this was the moment of departure, the threshold between presence and absence. The guide's form shimmered softly, becoming more translucent with each step, yet their voice remained clear, steady, and warm. "Morty, you have carried the lantern well. You have learned to notice, to care, and to respect fragility. Now you must continue without me beside you. Carry what you have learned into the world outside, into the lives you touch, into the quiet moments where courage and gentleness meet." Morty felt tears prick the corners of his eyes, though he did not move to wipe them. The emotion was not sadness alone. It was the recognition of connection, of wisdom passed quietly, of the fleeting but meaningful presence of another. He realized that the guide's farewell was not about leaving him behind, but about trusting him to carry their lessons forward, to honor the park, its fragility, and the lessons of stillness and attentiveness. "I will," Morty said softly, letting the words float into the calm space around him. The guide's smile deepened, and for a moment Morty could almost see the weight of their approval, a quiet nod of acknowledgement that transcended language. They were gone, not in a rush, not with drama, but as gently as a whisper fading into the night. Morty remained for a long moment, letting the absence settle into him, feeling the weight of presence left behind. He walked slowly along the glowing pathways, the park now quieter without the guide's soft movements. The organs and structures hummed gently, the surreal landscape reflecting both light and memory, teaching him that even in departure there is continuity. The lessons of Anatomy Park had imprinted themselves in his mind. Fragility is to be honored, attention is a form of courage, and presence, even quiet presence, is a gift that extends beyond words. As Morty moved toward the exit, he glanced back one last time. The park shimmered faintly, glowing softly as if acknowledging the understanding he now carried. The guide's influence lingered in every corner, in the quiet collapse of a soft bridge, in the reflections of crimson glassy rivers, in the delicate lattice of the crown of fragility. Everything seemed to whisper, "Carry this forward, gently, attentively, with courage born of quiet observation." Morty understood now that this farewell was not final but transformative. He felt the gentle expansion of empathy within him, the awakening of care that did not demand acknowledgement, and the courage to face fragility without fear. Every step toward the exit was a step into a world he now saw differently, not just as a landscape of science or adventure, but as a realm of interconnected lives, delicate beauty, and the quiet power of being present. Finally, he reached the threshold, the soft glow of the park mingling with the dim light of the world outside the body. He paused, lantern raised, letting the warmth of understanding fill him fully. The guide's departure had not left a void, but a space for him to fill with his own careful, quiet choices. Morty stepped through, carrying the lantern, carrying the lessons, carrying the courage to be attentive and gentle. As he emerged, the park behind him shimmered like starlight fading at dawn. Morty's heart swelled with gratitude, a calmness settling over him that he had not felt before. He looked up at the soft light of the stars above and whispered, almost to himself, "Thank you for everything." The words seemed to resonate, carried by the quiet spaces of the night, mingling with memory, with understanding, with the lingering presence of a companion who had shaped him without ever needing to stay. Morty's steps grew steady, calm and purposeful, as he walked toward the exit of the surreal body, toward the life waiting outside, carrying the knowledge that even in absence, care and presence endure. Anatomy Park would remain softly glowing in memory, a testament to the lessons of gentleness, courage, and the quiet power of understanding. And though the guide was gone, their farewell had left him wiser, gentler, and brimming with a serenity that would echo far beyond the corridors of this dreamlike world. Morty drifted through the corridors of the body, his lantern casting a soft, wavering glow on the surreal landscape. The organs hummed quietly, like the gentle murmur of a midnight river, and the soft luminescence reflected in his eyes, carrying the lessons of the guide with every step. He felt neither fear nor urgency, only a serene understanding that this journey, though strange and dreamlike, was shaping something inside him far deeper than memory alone. The path narrowed as he moved, curving gently like a slow stream of light guiding him forward. Each footstep was measured, deliberate, yet effortless, as if the park itself were leading him toward the world outside. The air was cool but comforting, carrying a faint scent of antiseptic mingled with something more ethereal, like the delicate sweetness of dawn before the sun fully rises. Morty inhaled slowly, letting the scent fill him with a calm alertness, the kind that makes you aware of life's quiet intricacies. As he walked, Morty reflected on everything he had witnessed: the glowing organs, the rivers of crimson that mirrored the stars, the gentle tremble of collapsing structures, and the guide's steady wisdom. Every moment had been a lesson in stillness and attentiveness. Every corridor whispered truths about fragility, about the courage of observing, and about the quiet acts that matter most in the spaces between chaos and distraction. He came to a chamber bathed in soft, golden light, different from the pale, dreamlike glow of the rest of Anatomy Park. The walls shimmered like liquid amber, reflecting fragments of memory back at him. Morty realized this must be the final chamber, the threshold between the park and the world he had known before he entered. He paused, lantern raised, letting the golden light wash over him. It was a warmth that seemed to seep into his bones, settling the residual tension of uncertainty that had accompanied him from the start. Morty's thoughts turned briefly to Rick, imagining him observing from a distance. He understood now that Rick had not just been curious about the park or the science behind it. Rick had been silently guiding him, watching over his journey without intrusion. Morty felt a quiet swell of gratitude. He knew this moment, the exit, was not just his alone but shared in spirit with Rick, who had trusted him to navigate this strange world with care and attentiveness. The soft hum of the organs faded slightly as Morty stepped further into the chamber, replaced by the faint rhythm of a heartbeat, steady and calm, echoing the pulse of life itself. He realized that this journey had been less about adventure and more about perception, understanding, and the gentle recognition of the fragility that makes every life precious. Morty's grip on the lantern relaxed. He no longer needed its light to navigate. He felt luminous from within, guided by the calm awareness he had cultivated throughout his passage. As he reached the threshold, the park behind him shimmered like starlight captured in water, soft and unfinished. Morty turned once to look back, etching the memory into his mind. The quiet collapse of the structures, the gentle ripple of the rivers, and the absence of the guide who had left without fanfare, leaving only wisdom in their wake. It was a moment of closure that did not demand ceremony, a farewell that carried meaning in its quietness. Stepping forward, Morty felt a subtle shift, as if he were emerging from a dream within a dream. The luminescent glow of the park dimmed behind him, replaced by the familiar warmth of the Christmas morning light filtering through the windows of his home. The world outside was calm, unaware of the journey he had taken, yet he felt the resonance of it deeply, as if the echoes of the park had settled into his very being. The family gathered quietly, exchanging soft laughter and murmurs, yet Morty's mind was elsewhere. He could sense Rick watching, a silent presence in the corner of his awareness. Morty smiled faintly, understanding that Rick's guidance, though subtle, had been constant. He carried the lessons forward, the courage of stillness, the value of attentiveness, and the gentle care owed to life in all its forms. Anatomy Park had imparted its wisdom, not through spectacle or chaos, but through subtle observation, patience, and respect for fragility. Morty walked to the window, peering out at the quiet morning sky. Snowflakes drifted lazily, soft and deliberate, each one unique, fragile, and perfect. The light shimmered off the frost, and Morty felt a kinship with the universe, a gentle connection that made everything seem possible and yet tenderly finite. It was a calm recognition that life's beauty often exists in quiet moments, in things we almost overlook yet cannot truly forget. He glanced down at the lantern in his hands, now just a token of the internal light he had discovered. The glow was no longer necessary, yet he kept it close, a reminder that guidance sometimes comes not from instructions or words, but from presence, attention, and the courage to navigate uncertainty with care. Morty's heart swelled with gratitude for the guide, for Rick, and for the journey that had illuminated so many small truths. Morty moved to the center of the room, sitting quietly on the couch, letting the light of the Christmas morning fill him. His breathing was calm, steady, in harmony with the quiet rhythm of the world around him. The lessons of Anatomy Park were etched deeply: the courage of observation, the power of empathy, and the gentle understanding that even the smallest acts of care ripple far beyond their origin. He imagined the park resting quietly, shimmering softly in memory, unfinished yet luminous. The guide's teachings, Rick's presence, and the lessons of the surreal journey remained with him, folded into the folds of consciousness that one only discovers in stillness. Morty closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the day, the memory of the park, and the quiet light of his internal lantern cradle him. In that moment, Morty understood fully that the exit of light was not merely physical. It was symbolic, an emergence from a journey of learning and reflection, a passage from uncertainty to awareness, from strangeness to understanding. The park would remain in memory, glowing softly, and he would carry its lessons into every step he took beyond this quiet, snowy morning. And as Morty breathed in the serenity of the room, he felt a whisper of the guide's presence, a soft, invisible hand on his shoulder, affirming that what he had learned would guide him in all the quiet, unnoticed corners of life. The exit was complete, but the wisdom endured, gentle and luminous, like starlight that never truly fades. The first light of Christmas morning spilled softly through the curtains, painting the quiet living room in gentle hues of gold and soft lavender. Outside, the world was still, dew clinging delicately to every branch, every blade of grass. Inside, Morty moved with a careful slowness, his footsteps almost silent on the wooden floor. He glanced at his family, gathered in their usual spots. But something had shifted. A calm, subtle weight rested over them, as if the quiet journey he had undertaken inside Anatomy Park had rippled outward, touching even the familiar, bustling corners of his home. He saw the faintest smile on his mother's face, not one of excitement or cheer, but of gentle contentment. His father shuffled quietly with a mug of coffee, unaware that the universe had whispered to him through the soft pulse of stillness. Rick, seated a little apart, seemed less restless than usual, his gaze distant but softer, almost reflective. Morty realized that this was a morning unlike any other, not in celebration or chaos, but in the shared silence that wrapped them in warmth and familiarity. Every sound was measured, every movement gentle, as though the room itself had learned to breathe slowly. The air held the faint scent of pine and cinnamon from the holiday, mingled with the lingering warmth of a night spent dreaming, exploring, and understanding the fragility of life. Morty's heart swelled with quiet gratitude. He understood without words that family was not just proximity or shared space, but the subtle interweaving of presence and care. He tiptoed to the window, watching the soft glow of the rising sun scatter across rooftops and treetops, each ray a delicate brushstroke painting the day in serenity. There was no rush, no urgent chatter. Even the usual clatter of breakfast seemed hushed, subdued by the invisible rhythm of gentle awareness that had settled over the household. Morty felt the lessons of Anatomy Park within him: stillness, observation, reverence for life's small intricacies, guiding his thoughts, softening his anxieties, and reminding him that quiet courage could flourish even in ordinary places. Rick's eyes met Morty's for a brief, wordless moment, a shared acknowledgement that this calm, unremarkable morning was far more profound than any adventure. Morty's gaze wandered to the tree, to the presents waiting untouched, to the faces of those he loved, and he recognized that the world outside, chaotic and loud, would continue its relentless pace. Yet within these walls, a different rhythm existed, one of careful breathing, attentive hearts, and an unspoken bond strengthened by shared stillness. He sat down on the soft carpet, cross-legged, and let his thoughts drift like snowflakes falling through pale morning light. Each detail of the room seemed imbued with quiet significance: the gentle tick of the clock, the soft reflection of sunlight on a framed photograph, the way the firelight flickered just enough to create warmth without heat. Morty noticed that even the smallest actions, a sip of cocoa, the shuffle of slippers, and were acts of tenderness, gestures carrying meaning he had only begun to understand. He recalled the tunnels and corridors of Anatomy Park, the soft glow of the lantern of memory, and the whispering organs that had taught him the vulnerability and beauty of life. He realized that this stillness and this calm morning was not absence but presence, a reflection of the lessons learned in the hidden recesses of the human body. in the small unseen details of experience that shaped understanding and empathy. Morty felt a wave of gratitude, not just for the day, but for the quiet teaching moments that had made him more attentive, more alive to subtle joys, and more capable of noticing wonder in the simplest of things. He glanced back at Rick, who was now leaning slightly against the sofa, eyes closed briefly, as though resting without surrendering his awareness. Morty understood that Rick's presence had changed too, not in gesture but in essence. A subtle softening had taken place, a recognition that some things, care, attentiveness, quiet understanding, mattered far more than invention, chaos, or urgency. Morty smiled faintly, not loud, not celebratory, but full of warmth, realizing that the world, despite all its unpredictability, had carved out a moment for pause, for reflection, for connection. The room seemed suspended in this gentle bubble of awareness. Even the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the house settling, and the faint whistle of wind outside became part of a lullaby, a cadence that encouraged the mind to slow, to breathe, and to rest. Morty allowed himself to sit fully in the sensation of belonging, of knowing that love and care are sometimes silent, not spoken or demonstrated through grand gestures, but present in patient attention, in the rhythm of shared existence, in the soft spaces between words and actions. He felt his own heartbeat in sync with the quiet pulse of the room, and the invisible threads connecting him to his family strengthened, almost imperceptibly, yet undeniably. Every breath felt sacred, every glance, every small smile, every subtle gesture became part of a tapestry of understanding, a shared language of calm and empathy. The memory of Anatomy Park, of fragile organs, glowing corridors, and whispered truths lingered softly in his mind, blending seamlessly with the serenity of home. Morty thought of the years ahead, of the chaos, adventures, and noise yet to come. But for this moment, he understood that calm reflection and gentle attentiveness were as vital as any discovery or invention. He realized that even when the world demanded haste, even when chaos threatened, there could always be a quiet harbor, a still center where hearts and minds could find rest. And so, the morning unfolded slowly, each second steeped in calm, each breath an affirmation of belonging, of love, of attentive presence. Morty felt a tender certainty that no matter how vast, strange, or unpredictable the universes he might explore with Rick, this stillness, this shared moment of quiet family awareness, would remain within him, luminous and steadfast, a quiet refuge in a noisy world. In the hush of the morning, Morty allowed a soft exhale to escape him, letting the stillness wash over him completely. He watched the sunlight shift across the room, the small dust particles dancing like tiny stars, and understood, with an almost sacred clarity, that this gentle, ordinary morning was an extraordinary gift. Every heartbeat, every breath, every subtle connection was a thread weaving him into the intricate, beautiful fabric of life. And somewhere in that quiet, golden-lit living room, surrounded by the unspoken love of his family, Morty felt the depth of peace that comes not from adventure or discovery, but from presence, from attentiveness, from quietly sharing the space of life with those we care for most. The morning air hung with a quiet stillness, soft as a whisper, and as delicate as the frost glimmering on the window panes. Morty lingered near the living room, tracing the sunlight's gentle movements across the wooden floor with idle fascination. Beside him, Rick sat in his worn armchair, the usual bustle of his mind seeming unusually tamed. He cradled a mug of coffee, not as a crutch for chaos, but as if holding a small anchor to the moment, a token of presence rather than necessity. For once he did not fidget, did not mutter or invent or problem solve. He simply existed, allowing the silence of the room to settle around him like a soft blanket. Morty noticed the rare, subtle tremor in Rick's posture, a fragile hesitation in the spaces between his movements. It was as though the weight of something long buried had found a voice in the quiet, though the words themselves had yet to form. Rick's eyes were distant, staring not at the room, nor the floor, nor even the faint glow of the rising sun, but into a memory that only he could see. And then slowly Rick spoke, his voice low, almost reverent, more confessional than casual, as if unveiling something sacred. "Morty," he began, pausing to take a measured sip from the mug, "you know, Anatomy Park, it wasn't just science. Not really. His words were gentle but carried weight, a subtle tremor of vulnerability that Morty rarely, if ever, heard in his grandfather. The sentence lingered in the room, expanding to fill every corner of the calm morning, like a soft exhale after a long-held breath. Morty's heart stuttered in response. He had seen Rick in countless strange, perilous, and chaotic situations, but never like this, never so quiet, so reflective, so willing to reveal the tender undercurrent that often hid beneath genius, cynicism, and bravado. Morty's hands curled lightly around his own mug, though he did not drink, caught in the rare gravity of the moment. I don't understand," he whispered, careful not to disturb the fragile air. Rick gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile, the corners of his mouth tugging upward like a thread of light in shadow. "It's okay, Morty. It doesn't need to be fully understood. But the body of the park, every corner, every corridor, it was memory. A map of what people carry inside them, not just cells and systems, but the things they love, fear, hope for. Even the tiny bits they forget about. I wanted to show you that there's more to life than the observable, more than what science can measure." Morty felt warmth in his chest, a quiet resonance that spread through him, almost as if the soft luminescence of Anatomy Park had followed him home, resting gently in the spaces between his ribs. He thought of the glowing corridors, the whispering organs, the lantern of memory illuminating fragile truths. He thought of the guide's gentle explanations, the slow rhythm of Morty's own breathing, in sync with the surreal park's soft heartbeat. And then he understood, not in words but in a deep, serene clarity, the nature of Rick's confession. "You mean, it wasn't just an adventure?" Morty murmured, voice barely audible. "It was teaching me, showing me what matters." Rick nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, as though such a gesture could carry the gravity of 1,000 words. "Yes, Morty. You saw fragility, you saw wonder, you saw life in its purest, simplest form. That's the lesson, not danger, not spectacle. Not invention, just being present, noticing, caring." His gaze softened, landing briefly on Morty with an intensity that was neither demanding nor insistent, but profoundly steady, like the calm current of a river. "You can forget the numbers, the gadgets, the explosions. You can't forget the feeling of seeing something beautiful and fleeting, and knowing you were part of it, even briefly." Morty swallowed, words failing him, but understanding blooming quietly in his mind. He remembered the river of blood, reflecting the stars not as horror but as gentle illumination. He remembered the guide's whispered truths, and the soft collapse of the park like sand slipping slowly through a hand. He remembered Rick's eyes, watching without interference yet full of care. And now, sitting here in the morning sun, Morty realized that those lessons were not bound to the park, the body or the dreamlike corridors. They were alive within him, delicate, luminous, and enduring. Rick leaned back, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Morty could hear the faint clink of the mug against the armrest, the subtle hiss of coffee settling. The room felt suspended in gentle stillness, each second lengthened just enough for observation, reflection, and understanding. Morty found himself breathing more slowly, as though the calm had seeped into him, warming him from the inside, anchoring him in the profound safety of presence. "I think I get it, Rick," Morty said finally, his voice carrying a soft certainty. "It's not about what we do or how wild it is. It's about noticing, about being there, about care." Rick's lips quirked upward again, just slightly, and for the first time in a long time he allowed himself a flicker of relief, as though confirming Morty's understanding lifted some invisible weight. "Exactly, Morty. And sometimes that's the hardest lesson of all, but it's also the most grounding. It's what keeps you human, keeps you tethered when the world spins too fast, when chaos becomes noise instead of purpose." The morning stretched lazily. Morty watched Rick sip again, each movement deliberate, careful, grounded. And in that quiet intimacy, that unspoken acknowledgement of shared experience, Morty felt a swell of gratitude, not for the adventure, not for survival, but for the subtle, unassuming act of recognition, of being seen and cared for in a way words could scarcely capture. Rick's voice broke the silence again, quieter this time, almost a whisper. "Morty, you'll carry this with you even when I'm not." Even when the chaos resumes, you'll notice, you'll care. That's the most important thing I can leave you with, and it's far more valuable than anything I've ever invented." Morty nodded, letting the words settle like a soft layer of snow over his consciousness. He imagined the park still glowing, the corridors alive with quiet energy, the faint echoes of memory and care still lingering in every nook. And in that quiet, he felt a tether to Rick's own humanity, fragile but luminous, grounding them both in the subtle wonder of being alive, attentive and present. The room seemed to breathe with them, each inhalation a pulse of reassurance, each exhalation a release of tension and fear. Morty understood more fully than ever that lessons could be gentle, moments could be still, and love could reside in quiet observation just as powerfully as in action. Rick's confession, soft and understated, had unveiled something fundamental. The extraordinary often hides in the ordinary, in the spaces between words, in attentive presence, in the gentle acknowledgement of life's fragile beauty. And as the sun climbed higher, spilling golden light into the room, Morty felt the depth of that quiet truth settle within him. He realized finally that this morning, this confession and the lingering calm of shared understanding were themselves a gift, one that would remain long after the day's chaos returned. It was a lesson, a memory, and a lullaby all at once, a gentle, enduring pulse of care and presence. Rick, eyes still calm, still reflective, finally allowed a small, almost imperceptible sigh of contentment to escape. Morty returned it, a silent exhale that mirrored the quiet gravity of the moment, and for a few minutes they simply sat together side by side, in the luminous stillness, knowing that the world could wait, and that the subtle truths of life, memory, and care were enough to sustain them through anything. The night outside was gentle, stretched across the sky like a soft, inky blanket, sprinkled with tender pinpricks of starlight. Morty and Rick stepped quietly out of the house, the familiar creak of the porch under their feet, a gentle reminder of the world they returned to after the dreamlike journey through Anatomy Park. The cold kissed their cheeks lightly, not harshly, but as if the air itself carried a soft invitation to notice, to linger, to breathe. The stars, countless and steady, seemed to bend closer, leaning down to watch the quiet reunion of grandfather and grandson in their unhurried walk. Morty's hands were tucked into his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, as though he were carrying the weight of the lessons from the park. Though they were not burdensome. They were soft, luminous, like the gentle glow of a lantern in the darkness. Rick walked beside him, slower than usual, each step deliberate, unpressured by the urgency of adventure or invention. It was a rare thing to witness Rick like this, present, mindful, unmasked by sarcasm or chaos. His eyes flickered occasionally to the sky, or to the soft sway of branches in the night breeze, and back to Morty, always patient, always observing. "Sometimes, Morty," Rick said quietly, voice blending with the wind, "the best adventures aren't the ones with monsters or gadgets. They're the ones you carry inside you afterward. The ones that remind you what it is to notice, to care, to just be." His words were not a command nor a lecture, but a gentle hand laid upon the spine of understanding. Morty felt the warmth of them settle in his chest, echoing the lessons whispered by Anatomy Park's corridors, by the lantern of memory, by the quiet guide who had faded into soft luminescence, leaving him wiser. They walked through the meadow at the edge of the woods, where frost glittered like sugar in the moonlight. The grass was soft underfoot, cushioned by the quiet hum of the night. Crickets sang in low, rhythmic choruses, and the occasional whisper of wind through pine needles felt like an exhaled lullaby. Morty noticed every detail, not out of obligation, but as if his senses had been sharpened gently, attuned now to the subtleties of life he might have overlooked before. He glanced at Rick, who moved with the rare ease of someone no longer burdened entirely by brilliance or guilt, and felt a swelling of quiet gratitude. "You know, Rick," Morty said after a while, his voice soft, carrying but not demanding, "I think I understand now. It's not the chaos, not the danger, not the gadgets. It's noticing. Being there, paying attention, caring." Rick gave a slight nod, the kind that required no emphasis because it held a universe of meaning. "Exactly, Morty. And it's not just about big gestures or dramatic moments. It's the small ones. The stillness, the quiet observation, the willingness to see someone, something, for what it really is. That's the adventure no one ever talks about, and yet it's the one that shapes everything else. Morty looked up at the sky, tracing constellations he had only half recognized before, but now seemed intimately familiar, almost like old friends waiting to greet him. The stars reflected in the river nearby, glimmering softly, and he thought of the river of blood inside Anatomy Park, once strange, unsettling, now transformed in memory into something of quiet reflection and luminous beauty. He realized that the lessons of the park were not confined to the surreal corridors of a man's body. They had seeped into his own life, into the moments he now moved through, and into the very presence of Rick beside him. The two continued their walk side by side, their steps synchronized not by force, but by the gentle cadence of shared understanding. Morty noticed the faint rustle of leaves, the distant chirp of an owl, the soft creak of the bridge over the little stream they crossed. Every sound was magnified in its gentleness, a subtle symphony that seemed to acknowledge their passage. Rick's eyes occasionally flicked downward, catching the shimmer of frost or the reflection of moonlight, but always returned to Morty. There was no rush, no need for urgency. For once, the universe seemed to have slowed to match the rhythm of their hearts. Rick spoke again, quieter this time, almost a whisper to the night itself. "Morty, it's easy to get lost in doing, in fixing, in inventing. But sometimes the hardest and most important thing is to just walk, just be with someone. Not talking, not explaining, not trying to impress, just presence." Morty nodded, feeling the weight and relief of the word settle like snow over his shoulders. Presence. That was the true lesson, and the one he would carry silently through all the chaos that would inevitably return. They reached a small hill overlooking the meadow, where the trees parted just enough to see the horizon tinged with the faintest blush of early dawn. Morty paused, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. He felt a serene understanding bloom within him, that the journey through Anatomy Park, the whispered confessions, the gentle lessons, the reflective silence, were not bound by walls, corridors, or even time. They were living, breathing parts of him now. Embedded in the quiet of his perception, in the awareness of fragile beauty, and in the rhythm of shared presence, Rick stayed beside him, silent, allowing the young man to absorb the landscape. The stars, the hush of night slowly yielding to morning. Morty felt an intimate connection not only to the park and its lessons, but to the grandfather who had guided him here. He understood in a way he never had before that Rick's genius was not only in creation or adventure, but in the subtle teaching of care, of observation, and of the quiet, enduring courage it took to simply be present. "Thanks, Rick," Morty murmured, voice small, honest, and full of reverence. "For everything. For letting me see. For letting me understand." Rick gave a faint smile so subtle it might have been imagined, yet it held a warmth that reached deep. "You don't need to thank me, Morty. I just wanted you to know. Sometimes the biggest adventures are inside us, inside our hearts and minds. And sometimes just walking beside someone quietly is enough to learn everything." They lingered a few more minutes on the hilltop, watching the horizon shift as dawn began to filter through. The meadow beneath them was bathed in soft, gold-tinted light now, and Morty felt the quiet exhale of the world, the gentle sigh of life moving forward. He knew as he glanced at Rick that this moment, their walk, their stillness, their understanding, would be etched in memory forever. It was a sanctuary in time, a pause that would ripple through all the moments to come, as they finally descended the hill, back into the path that would return them to the warmth of the house. Morty felt a deep, unspoken gratitude. Anatomy Park had taught him about fragility, mortality, beauty, and care. But this walk, this shared, unhurried presence, taught him about connection, trust, and the quiet power of being alongside someone who sees you fully and accepts the silence between words. Rick's hand brushed lightly against a branch as they passed, careful not to disturb even the smallest leaf. Morty noticed, a soft smile lifting his lips. He understood, without needing explanation, that Rick's care extended outward into the world, not just to inventions or interdimensional exploits, but to these quiet, tender moments that mattered more than any grand spectacle. They reached the doorstep of their home, the world now brighter, but still infused with the soft, residual glow of night. Morty inhaled deeply, letting the crisp morning air fill him with calm. He realized that this final walk together, so ordinary and yet so profound, had left an indelible mark, a reminder that life's true adventures are often quiet, shared and full of attentive care. And as they stepped inside, leaving the meadow and stars behind, Morty felt the gentle pulse of understanding settle within him. Presence, care, observation, and quiet courage were no longer abstract lessons from a surreal park. They were living, breathing truths he could carry with him always, a legacy gently woven into the soft fabric of his own being. The night wrapped around the world like a soft, endless blanket, and Morty found himself walking beside Rick, their steps slow, careful, almost floating in rhythm with the quiet hum of the universe. The park, the adventures, the whispers of strange organs. They felt distant now, like fragments of a dream, yet somehow their warmth lingered between them. Morty glanced at Rick, half expecting a smirk, a sarcastic remark, or a gesture that would turn the solemn quiet into chaos. But tonight there was none of that. Rick's face was gentle, his eyes softened by some unspoken understanding that Morty couldn't quite name. It struck Morty how rare these moments were. He had seen his grandfather as a whirlwind, a force of nature, brilliant and dangerous in ways that left Morty both awed and exhausted. Yet walking here beneath the pale moonlight, with stars scattered like distant lullabies overhead, Morty felt the warmth of a presence that didn't need to speak to be profound. Words, Morty realized, could sometimes be too loud, too clumsy, too final. Here in this quiet world between them, silence was enough. Silence was their language. They walked through the meadow, each blade of grass bending softly under their weight, each ripple of wind carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Morty felt that familiar tremor of anxiety in his chest, the one that surfaced when the unknown stretched out before him. But it was tempered by something else, a steadiness he hadn't felt in a long time. Rick, he noticed, carried no device, no gadget, no weapon. Even the usual hum of invention, the occasional flicker of electricity that hinted at chaos, was absent. It was as if the universe itself had pressed pause, asking them simply to exist, to notice, to breathe. Morty remembered the guide, the soft words whispered among organs, the lantern he had carried through corridors of fragility and memory. Those lessons, subtle as they were, had changed something deep inside him. Courage wasn't about action. It was about presence. It was about allowing oneself to witness life without fear. And as he watched Rick, he realized the same truth applied to his grandfather. He didn't need to change Rick. He didn't need explanations, adventures, or even apologies. Presence shared quietly was the gift that neither time nor chaos could diminish. "Grandpa," Morty began softly, his voice barely more than a whisper, "I think I get it now. I get why you brought me along. It wasn't just the adventure. It was everything in between." Rick's eyes, usually sharp and calculating, softened further. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. There was no reply, no lecture, no sarcasm. Just that nod, small but weighty with acknowledgement. Morty understood that this was their goodbye, though not really a goodbye. Some connections, he thought, couldn't be ended. They were stitched into the fabric of being, as eternal and unyielding as the stars above. They walked a little further, and Morty noticed the way Rick's shoulders, usually tense and braced against the weight of universes, now slumped ever so slightly in trust. Morty realized then that teaching didn't always require instruction, and learning didn't always require words. Sometimes it simply required a willingness to move alongside someone, to witness them without judgment, to allow the quiet to fold around both of you like a warm blanket. And in that quiet, Morty felt the echo of the park lingering, not grotesque or terrifying, but soft, dreamlike, like a memory whispered across time. Anatomy Park, with its glowing organs, its rivers of red glass, its subtle lessons of fragility and care, was still there, somewhere. It lived within him now, a secret treasure tucked beneath his ribs, a place he could visit in sleep, in thought, in quiet moments when the world was too loud and he needed stillness. Rick didn't speak. He simply walked side by side, and for the first time Morty felt no fear, no need to fix, no urge to run. The air was gentle, brushing against their skin like a lullaby. Morty looked up at the stars again. They leaned closer tonight, or maybe it was just his imagination, but it felt intimate, as if the universe had bent its ear to listen to their silent confession. And there, beneath the infinite canopy, Morty understood something essential, that goodbyes are often illusions. Bonds the real ones do not break. They fold into starlight. They linger in quiet breaths. They survive all absence. Thanks, Morty whispered, almost to himself, almost to the universe. For everything. Rick glanced at him, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. Maybe pride, maybe affection, maybe just acknowledgement of a moment too soft to be dissected by words. Morty knew that he would carry this. The lessons, the quiet, the courage, the fragility, forward into whatever awaited them. It was not about adventure anymore. It was about understanding, compassion, and simply being present. They continued walking, each step measured, a rhythm that matched the gentle pulse of the night. Somewhere deep inside him, Morty felt Anatomy Park shimmer faintly, a soft echo of all that had been experienced. There would be challenges, there would be chaos, there would be times when Rick's genius and unpredictability threatened to overwhelm. But now Morty had discovered the power of quiet, the power of presence, the power of love not loud or demanding, but patient and unassuming, like moonlight spilling across a sleeping meadow. And then, without ceremony, they reached a small rise. From here the world seemed to stretch infinitely, a sea of shadowed hills and silvered trees. Morty took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the scent of pine and frost, and he felt an odd, tender clarity. Nothing needed to be fixed. Nothing needed to be explained. It was enough to walk, to notice, to simply exist alongside someone who mattered in silence, in trust, in gentle, unspoken understanding. Rick, still quiet, finally exhaled in a way that sounded like relief. Morty realized that the laughter, the chaos, the genius, the fear, all of it had led to this singular moment of peace. And in that realization, Morty felt something he had never felt before, a quiet, unshakable certainty that even when adventures ended, when chaos paused, when the world returned to its usual frenetic rhythm, there existed a space untouched by time, by conflict, by fear, a space where silence spoke louder than words, where presence was its own form of love. They lingered a little longer side by side, feeling the night fold around them. And though the goodbye hovered on the edges of consciousness, Morty knew it wasn't a farewell. It could never be. Bonds like this were stitched into the fabric of being, eternal as the stars, endless as the quiet lullabies of the universe, and in that gentle truth, they walked on. The world was quiet, soft as a pillow pressed against the ear. Rick and Morty sat side by side on the gentle slope of the meadow, their legs stretched toward the faint glimmer of starlight scattered across the horizon. The night air carried the soft scent of pine and damp earth, brushing past them with a tender, almost intimate patience. Here in this calm, the usual weight of adventure, invention, and chaos had melted away. The universe did not demand brilliance, heroics, or answers. It simply asked them to be, to breathe, and to notice the subtle beauty that whispered in the spaces between stars and shadow. Morty exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his shoulders dissolve into the cool night. He glanced at Rick, expecting some sign, sarcasm, impatience, or a fleeting smirk, but found only the quiet rhythm of breathing and the soft rise of Rick's chest beneath his lab coat. For a moment, Morty allowed himself to think of Rick not as a brilliant, unpredictable genius, but as someone human, someone capable of stillness, someone capable of the tender patience of simply existing alongside another. In the silence, Morty discovered a lesson that no chaotic adventure had taught him. That presence, undemanding and gentle, is itself a form of care. The meadow stretched before them like an infinite canvas, a soft expanse that carried no urgency, no expectation, no applause. The faint glow of moonlight painted their shadows long and gentle across the grass, and Morty realized he had never noticed how beautiful silence could feel. It was not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything else. The faint rustle of leaves, the soft chirp of distant night creatures, the steady cadence of breath and thought. And in this quiet, Morty felt the echoes of Anatomy Park, its glowing organs, its winding paths, its subtle teachings. The journey within the body had been strange, surreal, and at times frightening. But it had left a gentle residue, a soft imprint of wonder, fragility, and empathy that now mingled seamlessly with the calm of the meadow. Rick shifted slightly, and the sound of fabric brushing against the grass was like a lullaby in the stillness. Morty looked at him and felt a tender ache in his chest. So much had passed between them, not just today, but years of adventures, escapes, experiments, and discoveries. Yet here, with nothing pressing them forward, nothing demanding their attention. The bond between them felt unspoken but absolute. Morty understood with a clarity that surprised him that learning from Rick was not always about words, about science, about survival. It was about witnessing, about being alongside him, about letting the quiet speak louder than explanations or lectures ever could. He remembered the guide in Anatomy Park, the soft voice that had whispered truths about fragility, mortality, and courage. That gentle wisdom had seemed distant at the time, cloaked in the surreal brightness of organs and corridors, but now Morty understood that it had always been a reflection of something far simpler and far more profound: the courage to be present, the courage to sit with silence, the courage to allow love, care, and empathy to exist without display or acknowledgement. And here, on this quiet slope, the echoes of that lesson resonated. Morty realized that this, the shared silence, the simple companionship, the unspoken trust, was as powerful as any adventure, any experiment, any cosmic journey he and Rick had ever undertaken. The stars above shifted imperceptibly, casting gentle beams across the landscape. Morty's eyes followed them, tracing invisible patterns, feeling the weightless comfort of being part of something vast yet intimate. In the quiet between breaths, he sensed the heartbeat of the universe itself, steady and patient. Rick's hand rested on the grass beside him, and Morty felt a flicker of warmth. Not from touch alone, but from recognition, from mutual understanding, from the shared acknowledgement of being alive and awake in a world that often rushed by without noticing its own subtle wonders. Minutes passed like droplets of honey, slow and sticky with meaning. Morty let his thoughts drift unhurried, unshaped by the usual chaos of his days. He considered the lessons he had learned, that bravery is sometimes stillness, that love is sometimes quiet, that understanding can exist without articulation. He considered Rick, the paradoxical figure of genius and unpredictability, and felt a deep, tender appreciation for the person who had taught him more through presence than words, more through shared silence than explanation. And in that reflection, Morty felt a peace he had never encountered, a calm that was not forced or constructed, but natural, as if it had been waiting all along for him to notice. Rick shifted again, letting his gaze sweep across the meadow, the distant glow of the horizon, the faint shimmer of starlight. Morty noticed the subtle tension in his grandfather's posture, the remnants of worry and responsibility, slowly fading into the night. For once there was no pressure to act, no inventions to manage, no chaos to navigate. The universe had opened a small pocket of quiet just for them, a space where observation and presence were enough. And in that space, Morty realized the beauty of endings that were not really endings, of connections that persisted beyond adventure, beyond explanation, beyond time itself. They remained there side by side, the silence stretching and folding around them like a warm quilt. Morty felt the last threads of fear, uncertainty, and urgency slip away. Anatomy Park's lessons, the strange landscapes of the body, the soft guide, the flowing rivers of red glass, all of it converged into a single understanding: that life, in its most tender form, is not about spectacle or achievement. It is about noticing, about presence, about shared quiet. And with that understanding came a profound gratitude, quiet and unassuming, yet unwavering. Morty's chest expanded, with the deep, full breaths of someone who had glimpsed something eternal, something beyond the chaos of the universe, something tender and gentle, stitched between moments of silence and starlight. Rick exhaled, a sound that seemed to blend with the night itself, carrying relief, acknowledgement, and an unspoken bond that transcended words. Morty smiled softly, feeling the weight of everything that had passed settle into a calm, comforting resonance. Here there were no goodbyes, no regrets, no lingering questions, only the shared awareness of presence, of quiet courage, of understanding that sometimes the deepest lessons are found in doing nothing at all but being. And as the stars continued their patient vigil, Morty leaned back, letting his gaze drift skyward, feeling the night enfold him in its gentle embrace. Rick remained beside him, a steady presence, a quiet companion, a reminder that connection, trust, and shared silence are sometimes the greatest adventures of all. The meadow held them, the stars watched, and the silence spoke louder than words. And Morty, with all the wisdom he had gleaned, understood the quiet truth. That even in a universe of chaos, brilliance, and unpredictability, there are moments that are simply still, simply shared, simply alive. The world had not changed, and yet everything felt transformed. Morty and Rick walked back slowly from the meadow, the faint glow of the stars guiding their steps like quiet beacons of remembrance. The adventure inside Anatomy Park lingered in Morty's mind, not as a spectacle of chaos or fear, but as a gentle, glowing memory like embers softly fading yet leaving warmth behind. The park, though unseen, had settled into their hearts, carrying lessons of fragility, empathy, and quiet courage that no machine or invention could ever replicate. Morty looked at Rick, noticing the subtle weight lifted from his shoulders, the calm presence that had replaced the usual restless energy. For a moment, Rick's eyes met Morty's, and without words, the understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement of all they had experienced, all they had learned, all the silence they had shared. Rick did not need to explain. Morty did not need to question. Presence alone in its tender, unspoken form was enough, and in that quiet communion, Morty felt the full spectrum of what it meant to journey alongside someone, not to conquer or control, but simply to witness and to care. They paused at the edge of the path, where moonlight spilled over the grass in soft pools. Morty felt the memory of the glowing organs, the gentle hum of life, and the whispered truths of the guide settle into a comforting rhythm within him. Anatomy Park was no longer a strange, surreal place inside a body. It had become a part of him, a quiet imprint of wonder and reflection that would linger through the days and nights to come. He realized that this park, in all its delicate intricacy, had taught him about mortality not as a source of fear, but as a reason to cherish presence, to honor the fleeting, fragile beauty of life in every heartbeat, every breath, every shared moment. Rick's hand brushed against Morty's shoulder briefly, a fleeting touch that carried more reassurance than any words could. Morty smiled softly, feeling the warmth of connection that transcended chaos, science, and adventure. He thought of the guide, who had vanished like a soft whisper, leaving behind only the light of understanding and the gentle echo of care. Morty understood now that some lessons are never shouted or inscribed on pages. They reside in the quiet spaces between breaths, in the gentle unfolding of awareness, in the subtle recognition of fragility and love. They walked on, each step deliberate, unhurried, savoring the simple act of movement through a world that often demanded speed, attention, and brilliance. The night carried a stillness that seemed almost sacred, a reminder that peace is not a reward but a choice, a gentle, deliberate embracing of the present. Morty felt the lessons of Anatomy Park mingling with the lessons of life itself. That courage is sometimes silent, that love is often quiet, that understanding is most profound when it does not need to be declared. And he carried all of this within him, tucked like a soft blanket, warming the edges of his thoughts and heart. They reached the crest of a hill, overlooking the quiet expanse of the world below. The snowless trees swayed in the night breeze, shadows stretching and folding like gentle waves. Morty imagined the organs of Anatomy Park, the soft glow of the lanterns, the patient flow of the rivers, and realized that the park was not truly gone. It existed wherever they remembered it, in the subtle act of noticing, in the courage to be present, in the gentleness they carried forward into their lives. The park waited in memory, glowing softly, unfinished like starlight, quietly alive, perpetually inviting reflection, and always offering a safe space for understanding and peace. Rick exhaled deeply, the sound blending seamlessly with the whispers of wind and the distant hum of nighttime life. Morty felt a quiet gratitude for this moment, for the unspoken teaching, for the way that silence had become a companion, a guide, a comforting presence that spoke in soft cadences rather than loud declarations. He looked at the stars, tracing constellations he had always known, yet now seeing them with new eyes, eyes trained to notice subtle beauty, to find wonder in fragility, to understand that life's greatest teachings often arrive in quiet, unassuming ways. As they descended the final slope, Morty sensed the culmination of everything, the laughter, the lessons, the quiet courage, the tender revelations. He felt the delicate weight of experience settle over him, a warmth that wrapped around heart and mind alike. And in that warmth, he realized that Rick, the universe, and even the surreal world of Anatomy Park had been part of a single, gentle truth, that life is most profound when observed with care, when approached with empathy, and when embraced in stillness. The park had been a teacher, not in chaos, not in spectacle, but in soft illumination guiding them toward understanding and reflection. They arrived at the familiar hum of the house, where lights still twinkled softly in the quiet night. Morty paused at the threshold. Looking back toward the horizon where stars hung like scattered diamonds, he imagined Anatomy Park resting in memory, glowing softly, patiently waiting for those willing to see, to learn, and to carry its gentle wisdom forward. And in that thought, Morty felt a deep, abiding peace. Not a conclusion, but a continuation of quiet reflection, a gentle exhale that filled every corner of his being with warmth and calm. Rick stepped beside him, their shoulders brushing lightly. They did not speak. They did not need to. The silence between them was more eloquent than any explanation, more comforting than any revelation. It was enough that they had been there, together, and that the lessons of fragility, empathy, courage, and quiet presence had found a home within them. And as the night stretched on, Morty felt the deep rhythm of life itself, steady, patient, and luminous, carrying with it the essence of every whispered truth, every glowing lantern, every quiet reflection from the park that had changed them both. And somewhere far beyond the reach of words, beyond the gaze of any eye, Anatomy Park rested in soft luminescence. It remained a sanctuary, a memory, a gentle reminder that life, even in its chaos, has places of stillness, wonder, and tenderness. It waited for all who would remember, all who would care, all who would let themselves be enveloped in the quiet warmth of understanding and reflection. Morty and Rick carried the park with them now, not as an adventure left behind, but as a living, breathing echo of calm courage and gentle companionship. The night drew on, and the stars observed silently, casting their tender glow across the world. Morty, breathing deeply, felt the last threads of fear, worry, and urgency settle into nothingness. Rick, beside him, remained a quiet, steady presence. The universe continued in its vast, patient rhythm, allowing them this final moment of reflection, and in the vastness of night, Morty realized the truth he would carry forever. Some journeys do not end. They rest softly, luminous and patient, awaiting the memory of those who will honor them with quiet presence and mindful reflection. And somewhere the park still waits, glowing softly, unfinished like starlight. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.